policing white supremacy, the enemy within. Both those phrases could be subject to some ambiguity. Why this title?
My co-author, Beth Zasloff, was something very simple and explained what the book is really trying to do. So policing white supremacy is about how law enforcement is ineffective in the way it addresses white supremacist and far-right militant violence, with instruction on how they can improve that performance, and more importantly, to recognize that it isn't just a law enforcement issue. This is something that giving law enforcement more powers isn't going to solve. In fact, that's part of the problem. And the enemy within was intentionally ambiguous, both because it somewhat references the idea that the way that law enforcement looks at white supremacist activity as a domestic issue when it's really international. There are white supremacists all over the world. These groups that engage in violence often network internationally. So this distinction, calling them domestic terrorists versus international terrorists, is part of the discrepancy in the way law enforcement addresses terrorism in the United States. But also the other ambiguous part is that a lot of the book focuses on affinity for these groups within law enforcement. So it's not just that these groups are outside law enforcement and need to be addressed by law enforcement, but that this is a problem that has festered within law enforcement since the beginning of history in this country.
Well, and many of our, certainly in the South in particular, many of the police departments started out as slave patrols, and as did, Patrick Henry gave a big speech about this at the ratifying convention for the Constitution, that without what became the Second Amendment, without something that explicitly authorized states to have militias and arm those militias, and he was specifically referring to the Virginia Slave Patrol. He was the largest owner of slaves in the state. He wouldn't vote for the Constitution. So arguably even the state militias, what we call the National Guard, started out as the slave patrols. White supremacy and its involvement with police, it goes way, way back, not just to the 1870s when the Justice Department came out of the effort to push back against the Klan and the fight against Reconstruction, if I've got that right.
Absolutely, and it's easy to look at that as a remnant of history, but it persists. And after the Reconstruction period ended and Jim Crow laws were put in place and black codes all across the United States, it's often easy to assume this is a southern U.S. problem, but fugitive slave patrols went all across the nation, and during Jim Crow, there were also black codes in Midwestern states and northern states. Vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan were powerful in Southern California. So this has never been just a regional problem. It's always been within the entire country in the way that our society creates racial hierarchies, and the police are the ones who enforce those hierarchies. The towns where a person of color is met on one side of the town by a police officer who takes them to the other side of the town and says, don't be here past sundown. These laws and policies were always enforced by police.
So part of this has to do with how we define, in the modern context, how we define terrorism. This is the word du jour since 9/11, and or the word decade or whatever.
Right.
And here we've got this guy who blew himself up in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, left behind two manifestos. One of them said, fellow service members, veterans, and Americans, it's time to wake up. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than with fireworks and explosives? Rally around Trump, Musk, Kennedy, and ride this wave to the highest hegemony for all Americans. He says, Americans must wake up purge the government and military. Military and vets must move on D.C. Militias facilitate and augment this activity until the purge is complete. He said, try peaceful means first, but prepare to fight to get the Dems out of the federal government and military by any means necessary. They all must go, and a hard reset must occur for our country to avoid collapse. If he was speaking not of Republican Democratic politics, but instead on behalf of Islam, and he had brown skin, he would have been labeled a terrorist instantly. And instead, I have not heard one single news report refer to this guy as a terrorist. What's going on with this?
That's right. The way that not just law enforcement, but the media talk about terrorism is highly politicized, and that's really part of the problem. As you said, it comes definitionally, this concept of terrorism is a highly politicized term, where it's applied not based on the type of conduct, but rather based on whether the government has a concern about that political cause or social movement, which is why you see the law enforcement response to activism that is meant to drive social change, particularly when it's led by people of color in this country, receive a tremendous amount of law enforcement attention, whereas white supremacist violence isn't even tallied. For years we've been, and in fact Congress passed a law requiring the FBI to document the number of domestic terrorism incidents, including breaking it down by white supremacists and the fatalities resulting thereof. And the FBI, as you said, for 25 years now, we've considered terrorism our number one priority, counterterrorism our number one priority, but they say that they don't collect domestic terrorism incident data. They don't know how many people white supremacists killed this year, last year, or any other year.
I want to get to your experience being undercover with these people, but it seems to me that it's not just race, that it's almost a caste system, certainly a class system. I mean, you've got obviously, race a big factor in this one. Dylan Roof killing a half a dozen people, black people in a church, and the police drive him to a Burger King because he says he's hungry, he hasn't had lunch, on the way to jail. And then you contrast that with, Luigi, who shot a white multimillionaire CEO, and they march him to jail with phalanx. I mean, with a military escort virtually, as if he was Osama bin Laden. The contrast is frankly shocking. And they never prosecuted Dylan Roof as a terrorist, as I recall. I think he was just prosecuted for murder, whereas Luigi is being prosecuted for terrorism as well. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me there's a differentiation in how the FBI and the Justice Department address white supremacist violence. And part of that comes from the history. One of the frustrations I've had over the last several years is a very widespread concept or idea by people who have previously been federal prosecutors who argue there is no domestic terrorism law. That's false, absolutely false. You can open the U.S. Code. There's an entire chapter called terrorism that defines both international and domestic terrorism simply by geography. Terrorism that occurs in the United States is domestic. Terrorism that occurs outside the United States is international. But they create these domestic terrorism categories by ideology.
We say fight back!
book club book for today is Talk Radio's America by Brian Rosenwald, subtitled How an Industry Took Over a Political Party that then took over the United States. This is from the introduction. August 1, 1988 marked the beginning of the long road to President Donald Trump. But even political junkies took little notice of the fateful events that unfolded that day as a failed disc jockey and former Kansas City Royals executive named Rush Hudson Limbaugh III made his national radio debut. Only a small audience tuned in. So poorly commemorated was the moment that we don't even know how many stations broadcast day one of Limbaugh's syndicated program. Limbaugh claims the show began on 56 affiliates, while other counts range from 57 and 87. From the beginning, the show was brash, entertaining, controversial, and boundary-pushing. Before Limbaugh, this sort of programming did not exist outside major cities. In 1983, there were just 59 talk radio stations nationwide, and the program on many of those stations consisted of advice shows, staged interviews, and caller-driven discussions of everything from neighborhood schools to abominable snowmen. Most talk radio programming focused on local concerns, and most of the industry's stars, such as Larry King and Jesse Raphael, had left-of-center views but rarely shared them. At the time of Limbaugh's national debut, talk radio had negligible political impact. In talk radio hotbeds such as Boston, hosts might influence local and statewide policy debates, especially on visceral issues such as seatbelt laws, but talk radio was not a partisan force in national politics. In fact, the wall-to-wall conservative political talk stations that dominate the AM airwaves today were impossible until 1987, thanks to a regulation called the Fairness Doctrine. That year, however, the Federal Communications Commission eliminated the policy, which required broad programming on controversial issues to offer an array of viewpoints. In this more permissive environment, Limbaugh would go on to revolutionize the radio business. In doing so, he helped unintentionally to spawn a major new political player. Within a decade, the broadcast format he inaugurated aired on more than 1,000 stations and kept millions company as they commuted, worked, and shouted back at their radios. It took just a few years before conservative talk radio began to influence national politics and public policy. That influence only grew throughout the decades as the business changed. Over the course of the 1990s and early 2000s, the number of nationally syndicated talk shows rose dramatically, and the content of talk radio programs became increasingly political and conservative. Liberal pundits and some scholars agree on the broad outlines of the story. Conservative station executives conspiring with their Republican allies built a format modeled on Limbaugh's program, and thousands of Limbaugh wannabes cropped up all over the country. Executives, hosts, and politicians turned talk radio into an appendage of the Republican Party, using the platform to get Republicans elected and advance the party's agenda. The success of talk radio led to the development of partisan and ideological cable news networks, and some hosts complemented their radio shows with primetime cable programs. Eventually, this content found a home in the new digital sphere, with equally strident cheerleaders proliferating on blogs and other online publications. This narrative makes liberals. After all, many conservative media executives and their corporate political action committees donate to Republican candidates, and most hosts champion conservative candidates and causes. But this narrative is wrong. In reality, the story of talk radio's emergence as a popular conservative format and the impact it had on American politics weaves together two, But this narrative is wrong. In reality, the story of talk radio's emergence as a popular conservative format and the impact it had on American politics weaves together two distinct, complex tales. Neither has anything to do with the conspiracy to create a media servant of the Republican Party. The first describes how talk radio spread across America, in the process saving AM radio from financial ruin. Limbaugh had no intention of affecting elections or legislation, and no inkling that he could. Nor did any of his early successors. The executives who gave these hosts a chance also had no interest in political outcomes. Hosts and their bosses were in business. They wanted to captivate listeners and make money, and they discovered, essentially by accident, that conservative political talk in the mouth of an entertaining personality achieved this. Conservative hosts had strong opinions, but their primary goal was, and still is, financial gain. And it is because they realized financial gain that more and more stations invested in their style and content while divesting from competing formats. The second story concerns talk radio's transformation after 1995 into an almost entirely conservative and doctrinaire medium that eventually spawned successors in other media, took over the Republican Party, and reshaped it in hosts' and listeners' image. Limbaugh was a great innovator, but he didn't change American media and politics all at once or on his own. In conservative talk radio's early days, hosts shared stations with liberal talkers and apolitical programs. There was not an immediate sense that conservative radio was the future either. But gradually, its success snowballed thanks to trial and error in the radio business, regulatory changes, political events, happenstance, and most importantly, listener behavior. Hosts also got a boost from marginalized conservative Republican politicians who realized that talk radio would enable them to circumnavigate the mainstream media.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. As far as I can tell, the only television network not carrying the funeral is Fox. They haven't even mentioned it all morning, to the best of my knowledge. We pop over there from time to time to check it out. It's kind of sad. The eulogies have seemed to be just the absolute... Louise made the comment to me this morning after hearing the eulogies from that were written by Walter Mondale and Jerry Ford, a candidate for president and a Republican president who were both close friends of Jimmy Carter's. They were read by their sons, and they were written back before Trump was even, running for office. And she said it's if they had Trump in mind. I mean, it's just, everything that was said about Jimmy Carter is that this man is the antithesis of Donald Trump. So, one of my heroes in many ways, Jimmy Carter. Even to this day, they're trash talking his presidency, which I think is just so wrong. I mean, the Reaganistas tried to rewrite Carter's presidency. They even renamed, his so-called malaise speech. He never once used the word malaise in it. But the Republicans labeled it, and the media picked it up, but I thought he was a damn good president. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the Israeli-Egyptian, Middle Eastern, blah-blah, war and things. He was the first president to take climate change seriously and try and do something about it. And had Ronald Reagan not criminally cut a deal, treasonously, cut a deal with the Ayatollah to hold on to the hostages, Jimmy Carter would have been reelected. He was a very popular president, actually, in the last year of his presidency, outside of that hostage situation. You can go back and look at the polls. And his popularity just collapsed in the 2 or 3 months before the election, in large part because rescue those hostages. And the hostages were only being held because Reagan had cut that deal. I mean, it's just amazing. Meanwhile, massive fires in California, and the lies of right-wingers are spreading even faster than the fires are. Yesterday, Donald Trump, echoing probably some Russian troll on Twitter, if Trump came out and said, well, this is because Gavin Newsom refused to sign the Water Restoration Declaration. There's no such thing. I mean, there's literally no such thing. Never was, never will be. On Fox, they're talking about, well, the reservoirs are empty. No, the reservoirs in California are actually full. The problem is when you get a bunch of houses on fire, and those fires are really, really hot, and the houses collapse, what happens to the copper piping inside the house? It breaks. What happens when copper water pipes break? Water starts spraying all over the place. What happens when that happens to a couple of hundred homes? The water pressure just collapses. Not to mention that, the firefighters are trying to pull it out of the hydrants, but it's really the collapsing structures that are destroying the water pressure in California. It's got nothing to do with Gavin Newsom. And it's got nothing to do with Kristen Crowley. Kristen Crowley is the head of the fire department in Los Angeles. She's a woman. And now you've got Elon Musk and others saying that this is because of DEI. She worked her way up, 22 years in the Los Angeles Fire Department. She worked her way up to the top. And the senior management is still mostly male. It had nothing to do with DEI. But hey, white men cannot tolerate a woman being in a position of authority, or at least these white men, white Republicans. And it's just disgusting. And then on top of that, you know, they're doing everything they can to deflect from the fact that it really should be the big oil companies in the United States that are paying to rebuild California. You know, instead of taxpayers, ones who knew in the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s. Well, that Jimmy Carter told the world in the 70s that climate change was real, that it was coming, that we needed to do something about it. He tried to create the nation's first solar bank to deal with this. I love to play that clip. I'm firing up my 360 here so I can do it for you. My tribute today to Jimmy Carter. But this is the Republicans are just doing anything they can to make sure that nobody in the media is talking about the fires in the context of climate change. The Santa Ana winds are stronger because the jet stream has been weakened, because the Arctic ice has melted. When the jet stream weakens, it drools down, and drooling down, it's amplifying the force of that high pressure system over the Rockies, which is pumping the Santa Ana winds in. Yeah, the Santa Ana winds have been around forever, but never like this. I mean, this is unprecedented. Los Angeles, and then on top of that, you know, these fires have burned more than 10,000 acres. On top of that, 16 months ago, Los Angeles had, a year and a half ago, Los Angeles had its first tropical storm, a massive rain event. Well, what did that do? It produced an explosion of grass. That was followed by the longest period of drought in the history of the region. Trying to find the exact details here, but I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, this is Judd Legum. He said, whenever there's a tragedy, you can count on Musk to argue that the root of the problem is that not enough white people are in charge. This is, blaming the fires and the response to the fires on DEI. Jasmine Crockett said, stop trying to act as if only white men are the ones capable right now. Public Citizen wrote, climate change is making natural disasters like wildfires worse and more frequent, full stop. But the far right doesn't like these facts. They blame everyone else, even DEI in Ukraine. Instead, they'll keep letting big oil kill the planet and find a new scapegoat. And Donald Trump saying, oh, it's all his fault, right? This is all the fault of Gavin Newsom. It's just, and he's calling him new scum, NEWSCUM. It's frankly pathetic. This, where's my Jimmy Carter clip here? Here, yeah, this is Jimmy Carter while he was president talking about what we need to do.
The energy crisis is real. It is worldwide. It is a clear and present danger to our nation. These are facts, and we simply must face them. What I have to say to you now about energy is simple and vitally important. Point one, I am tonight setting a clear goal for the energy policy of the United States. Beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977. Never.
All right, and then he continues about this.
Moreover, I will soon submit legislation to Congress calling for the creation of this nation's first solar bank, which will help us achieve the crucial goal of 20% of our energy coming from solar power by the year 2000.
And he did that, and Reagan reversed it. I mean, this is Because Reagan was being funded by the oil companies, but and by fossil fuel billionaires. So this is just crazy stuff, absolutely crazy stuff. Anyhow, a question inquiring minds want to know. Well, actually, we've got a lot we're going to talk about today. Phil Ittner is going to be with us in the second hour. Dean Obeidallah is going to drop by about why we shouldn't inaugurate Trump, that he's still barred. We're going to get into Bernie Sanders. Out of control. A cancer surgeon was called by United Healthcare in the middle of a procedure to challenge paying her. I mean, it's just crazy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
But one of the questions everybody's asking is, why does Trump want to let the January 6th criminals out of jail? I think I have an answer. I'll share that with you right after the break. And welcome back. Ted in Black Diamond, Washington. Hey, Ted, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. It's a beautiful sunny day.
Oh, is it? Great.
Change.
Yeah, it was here yesterday afternoon.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk about a parallel between Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers and Jack Smith with the January 6th papers that are being blocked for release. Ellsberg tried to convince a couple of senators, Fulbright or McGovern, to release the papers on the floor of the Senate because they could do that legally. Anything mentioned on the floor of the Senate would avoid prosecution, of course.
It's privileged by the speech and debate clause.
Right. That is an option, if he were to do that. And, of course, if it might expose Smith to possibility of prosecution. Of course, he might be able to appeal to President Biden about that. But I'm just talking about certain avenues because I think there is a moral imperative here to release those papers that, might bypass, judicial or legal rules that are seeming to obstruct this.
I agree with you, and in the second hour of the program, I have a whole little rant prepared, but here's my take in short form, and I'll revisit it in an hour. And that is that the Supreme Court has said that if the president does something that is official, that he has absolute immunity. So the only thing that is preventing Merrick Garland from publishing this report or making it fully available to the public is that Aileen Cannon has forbidden him to do so. If he ignores that, or if Biden ignores that and publishes the report, they're breaking the law because she just established the law and the Supreme Court is considering it. But the Supreme Court has said that Biden is above the law. So he could publish this and there's no way to hold him accountable for it. Or Garland could publish it and then Biden could pardon him. I mean, there's two different routes to getting this thing into the public. Either one of which, a Republican president would have taken. I mean, if we were talking about Ken Starr's report on Bill Clinton, which, by the way, Bill Clinton allowed to be published. I mean, that came out while Bill Clinton was still president, as you'll recall. But if Bill Clinton was trying, if a federal judge had stopped that from being published, and a Republican was in office, then, they would do this. They would do what I'm talking about. At least
George Bush did that with his subordinates. There was one who was stealing documents out of the archives, that were incriminating about the war in Iraq as well. I mean,
Yeah. Well, plus, didn't he let Ollie North off the hook somehow? I forget the details.
Oh, yeah.
I remember there was some outrage around that.
I don't remember all the details on that, but this is done a number of times before. So why are we playing softball when they're playing hardball?
Exactly. And Congressman Ro Khanna will be on the program on Monday. Maybe you could call back and ask him that question.
But at the very least, I think this information.
According to the Supreme Court, Joe Biden does not have to follow the law if it's an official act, and publishing that report would certainly be an official act. And in fact, when Jack Smith was put into office, the order doing so presumes the report and that it will be published. Ted, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's almost 20 minutes past the hour. Stay tuned. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Fort Lauderdale, Florida recently got whacked with 25 inches of rainfall in less than 7 hours. Tornadoes are tearing up the South and the Midwest in ways that they haven't seen frankly, ever before. I mean, there have always been tornadoes, but not like these. 200-mile-an-hour winds, these derecos that are a mile long. We have a serious crisis going on right now. There's also a major El Nino. It's off the coast of Peru right now. It's affecting the West Coast. So we're seeing wild swings from drought to floods to drought to floods in the West Coast. Climate change is here. Climate change is real, and climate change is a crisis. What do we know about it? What do we know about these things? How much worse is it going to get before it might get better? What can we do about it? We had a long conversation with Dr. Michael Mann, Distinguished Professor and Director of the Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania. There's a whole long rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In the shadows they gather near, waving flags, stoking fear. A storm brews dark, a bitter fight, marching forward into the night.
Putin, Modi, Duterte's call, strongmen rise, and democracies fall. Trump's armies, with faces unseen, a dangerous play in the American dream. The rise of Trump's thugs, fueled by hate, breaking the doors of a fragile state. From Proud Boys to 3%, their rage burns bright, their purpose bent. Brown shirts, black shirts, history's mark, echoed now in the fiery dark, armed and ready. A nation's divide, violence justified by a leader's pride. The wolves run wild, in packs they roam, turning streets to a battleground home. Liberty crushed beneath their boots, a chilling return to history's roots. The rise of Trump's thugs, fueled by hate, breaking the doors of a fragile state. From Proud Boys.
So today's, welcome back. Today's op-ed is titled, over at the Daily Take over at HartmannReport.com, is titled "The Rise of Trump's Thugs." And which is what that song was just all about. Back in the day, one of the most common characteristics of an authoritarian who's taken over a democracy is the use of extra-military, non-military, paramilitary militias and gangs to terrorize and sometimes even kill their political opponents. Back in the day, Hitler had his black shirts or brown shirts, and Mussolini had his black shirts. But today, Putin, for example, who was, elected in a democracy initially, uses a nationwide Russian gang called the Night Wolves, who terrorize and often kill people who speak out against him. He also used the Wagner Group to kill high-profile people. In India, Narendra Modi is supported by a right-wing gang known as the RSS, which is alleged to have even lynched Modi's religious critics. Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines had a group known as the Death Squad who murdered his political opponents, usually claiming they were drug dealers. Erdogan's Turkish goons are called the Okulari, which is Turkish for gray wolves. They often burst into homes in the middle of the night to beat suspected dissidents and journalists. In Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro had multiple right-wing groups who intimidated and killed people who offended him. The crime office, Escritório de Crema, was the most notorious. In Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro has a paramilitary group called the Colectivos, who are famous for assaulting people in broad daylight, kidnappings, even burning people out of their homes. And in Hungary, Viktor Orban relies on several civilian vigilante groups to terrorize gays, liberals, immigrants, and Roma people. the Hungarian Guard, the Magyar Garda, the Outlaws Army, the Beszereg, and the Legio Hungaria. So here we have all these strongmen, many of whom are very, very close friends of Donald Trump's, right? Fled to Mar-a-Lago when they were going to prosecute him for sedition. Trump just invited him to his inauguration. Bob Woodward says Trump has been having conversations with Putin for at least the last 2 years. Orban just visited Mar-a-Lago a short while ago. And Trump has praised Modi, calling him a, quote, total killer, and Duterte for saying, quote, he did an unbelievable job with the drug problem. So here's the question. Is Trump going to try and do the same thing that these friends of his have done? Encourage right-wing violence against liberals and minorities? I mean, he already has his own possible army. You know, at Enrique Tarrio's trial for sedition, the federal prosecutor said, you know, the Proud Boys were lined up behind Donald Trump and willing to commit violence on his behalf. They saw themselves as Donald Trump's army. The 3%ers provided security for Trump's rallies. The Oath Keepers provided security for Trump's rallies. Is this why Trump is planning to let so many violent January 6th right-wing gang members out of prison? Is he about to unleash a wave of violence and terror against Americans he feels have wronged him, or who are queer or black or Hispanic or libtards? Is he going to be stacking the Justice Department and FBI with who will look the other way if or when violence and civil rights violations start breaking out all across the United States? And if so, how's our media going to handle it? Will Trump succeed in normalizing it or distracting us from it, as the leaders that I just mentioned in these other countries have done in their countries? Is America's right-wing media going to cheer it on? Inquiring minds want to know, as they say. Is this the real reason that Trump wants to let these people out of jail? I mean, you got some really violent people here who killed 4 police officers, and 5 civilians died that day. And it sent 174 police officers to the hospital. 1 lost an eye, 1 lost a finger. Several had to retire because of their injuries, permanent, damage to their bodies, to their spines, to their broken bones. And these are the guys Trump wants to put back on the streets. Why? Is he going to try and do what Putin does? Is he going to try and do what Viktor Orban does? Is he going to try to do what Duterte did, or what Jair Bolsonaro did?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Jimmy Carter's funeral just wrapped up. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with me.
Our book for today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Kingdom of Lies, Unnerving Adventures in the World of Cybercrime by Kate Fazzini. This is from the preface. It didn't take me long in my career as a cybersecurity executive to figure out everyone was lying to me. The lie of all came at the very beginning, that cybersecurity is hard, too hard, certainly too difficult for someone who lacks years and years of deep technical training. That is no place for writers. That thicket of incomprehensible jargon alone seemed meant to discourage outsiders like me from entering the field. They told me I could never hope to understand the terminology unless I'd worked around it for a very long time, unless I had a special and complicated certification, unless I knew how to take apart and reassemble a computer, unless I knew how to code in Python and could read it, interpret it, and spot problems on sight. And if I somehow managed to learn the lingo, the learning curve for the rest of it would prove insurmountable. Lies, lies, lies. It's unfortunate because there's a huge gap between the demand for cybersecurity workers and the people available to fill those jobs. I think one of the reasons for that is because people can't imagine themselves doing this kind of work. Can you use a smartphone, make a PowerPoint, think on your feet, ever organize a night out to the movies with your friends that went well and nobody crashed their car to or from the event? Welcome to the 21st century's hottest career path. Are you able to charm the pants off women? Did you escape an abusive marriage? Have you ever hosted a toddler's birthday party at your home? Honey, I want you on my cybersecurity team. After reading the stories in this book, you will understand that what makes cybersecurity complicated is the complexity of human beings. So if you know how to deal with people, you can handle internet security. If you understand what makes people tick, not only will you be able to recognize a threat, you'll be one step ahead of your adversary. During my career as a cybersecurity executive at multinational corporations, a journalist for Wall Street Journal and later CNBC, and a professor at Georgetown University, I've met a lot of fascinating people. From the hackers who perpetrate malicious attacks to the security professionals who try to prevent these incidents from happening, and the alphabet soup of government agencies that do damage control. At the end of the day, they're all fathers, sons, mothers, sisters, and spouses. In other words, people just like us. Yes, the white hats cross paths with black hats and change alliances more frequently than you might expect, but they're driven by the same desires as the rest of us, even if sometimes it feels as if everyone in cybersecurity is allergic to the truth. As a professional, I was told a great many lies about the field I've grown to love so much. After becoming a journalist on the cybersecurity beat, I was told even more. Here are a few. Let me introduce you to the hacker community. This lie is usually delivered with a wink and a nod from someone who thinks they know every hacker on the planet. The truth of the matter is there is no hacker community. Sure, the guys who make a splash at the big annual conferences might say otherwise, but every country, every state, every faction, every identifying group has its own community of people who hack computers. Some of them are extremely conservative. Others are massively liberal. Some fall in between. Some wear suits and ties and work as lawyers during the day, while others look like everyday citizens and have great people skills as they pursue the idiosyncratic agendas. Some are good guys who got fed up with low pay and boring duties and became criminals. Some are criminals who ended up being good guys. Many start and end their careers on either end of that spectrum. Some, including many you'll meet in this book, are extremely proficient hackers who have no time to identify with any community at all. As a journalist, I was astonished at the number of people who came out of the woodwork to offer me exclusive access to the hacker community. I couldn't help but notice that the members of the source's hacker community were often people just like him or her. My point is there are many different types of people working in this field, and I can guarantee you that a lot of them are exactly like you. Here's another lie. He's a luminary in the cybersecurity field. He's probably not. Fame and luminescence don't typically intersect in this field. The people I've met who are actual geniuses aren't famous, and most of them don't have social media profiles. They tend not to pontificate on areas outside their expertise. The people who are constantly headlining conferences and who are so often offered up to me for interviews have less insight than those who stay underground. Anything a high-profile hacker is willing to share typically carries with it a massive and crystal clear agenda that I've learned to spot from a mile away. Even if a conversation is off the record, the intel coming from a top government official or other marquee corporate cybersecurity name carries little novel information. The only people who have illuminated the way for me in this world, and in this book, have been genuine practitioners who never held a C-level title. You've never heard of them, and because I've changed their names to protect their privacy, you probably never will. They are luminaries not because of the degrees they've collected or the events they've headlined, but because they carry a lantern that guides the path for others. These types of people typically don't have a public relations team. One of my favorite lies, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This one is usually delivered by someone who asserts that he or she knows the cybersecurity field better than anyone else. These people will brag that they know what it's like to be a hacker and can do things that no one else in the room can do. I'm always wary of those who try to establish their bona fides by discrediting the expertise of other cybersecurity professionals. The depth and breadth of this field is so vast that anyone who works in it is an expert at some part of it. And I have yet to meet someone who is an expert at all of it, not even close. Every view of an incident is informed by the reviewer, what he sees, what her level of expertise is, and that changes over time. It's like asking someone who lives in the plaza to describe Manhattan. The book is Kingdom of Lies by Kate Fazzini.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
nation, a chill in the air. A leader rises claiming he'll repair. But the cracks in the foundation, they're part of his plan to dismantle the democracy we built by hand. He calls the press the enemy, rewrites the truth, turns allies into traitors, empowers the uncouth. Courts packed with loyalists, the rule of law bends. Will we watch in silence as our freedom ends? Do not obey in advance, don't fall in line.
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Just one final tribute to Jimmy Carter this morning on the morning of his funeral. This is a conversation that I had with Jimmy Carter. Do you know the year, Sean? 2010, Sean believes it was. It was right after the Citizens United decision, because it's about the Citizens United decision. So here it is. Just a
political principles, for example. Our Supreme Court has now said, unlimited money in politics. It seems a violation of principles of democracy. In the minute or so we have left, your thoughts on that?
It violates the essence of what made America a great country in its political system. Now it's just an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery being the essence of getting the nominations for president or the elected president. And the same thing applies to governors and U.S. senators and Congress members. So now we've just seen a complete subversion of our political system as a payoff to major contributors who want and expect and sometimes get favors for themselves after the election's over.
Yeah, it's a sad commentary on things.
It is.
It's going to take a political movement to change this, isn't it?
Well, I think it's going to take either a horrible, disgraceful series of acts in our country that turn the public against it, and eventually maybe even the Congress and the Supreme Court. That would be the main thing. But at the present time, the incumbents, Democrats and Republicans, look upon this unlimited money as a great benefit to themselves, because somebody that's already in Congress has a lot more to sell to an avid contributor than somebody that's just a challenger. So it benefits both parties.
It's very unfortunate.
We hit a hard break there. Jimmy Carter was on a roll. But there was a remarkable statement that now America is just an oligarchy because of Citizens United. Incredible. So what's on your mind today? I'll pick up your calls here. Jen in River Forest, Illinois. Jen, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that, last night, I finally heard something in the media besides you praising Jimmy Carter for the hostages, and it was an interview on NPR by Ari Shapiro with a hostage, Barry Rosen, who was there from 1979 to 1981. And the interviewer had asked him, and I'm paraphrasing, what do you attribute the success of the release of the hostages to? And he said, without hesitation, Jimmy Carter. And he didn't mention anything that Reagan had did, but he did mention how President kept a picture of his children in his suit pocket every day and used that as sort of a little inspiration to keep him working at freeing those hostages. And he said he worked harder than anybody to get us free. And as far as people saying that, he should have used more force, he says, paraphrasing again, I don't blame him for not wanting to start a huge, violent action against the country, because that would have just led to more problems.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter negotiated the release of the hostages, but the Iranians' one of their conditions was that they could not be released until Carter was no longer president. And that's why, and that was part of their deal with Reagan, and that's why the hostages were released to the minute when Reagan raised his right hand and put his left hand on the Bible and took the oath of office.
I never knew about that until your show. And I never realized what an evil president that Reagan was. It makes me sick.
Oh, it really is. The damage that he did to this country, and that, and he created the foundation for the damage that George W. Bush did and the damage that Donald Trump did, and is preparing to do again.
Yes.
It's just it's such a sad thing, and it's so unfortunate. So few people know it, and and that so much of the right-wing media is just all over this thing. Yeah, Jen, thanks for sharing that story. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Yeah. David in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm sorry. I was watching the Carter funeral on PBS. Oh, so much. Matter of fact, Jimmy Carter, our ex-president, was the reason I joined the Navy. He was a executive officer, his lieutenant. He was a nuke.
Yep.
You cannot be stupid to work as a nuke, and you cannot be an executive officer of a nuclear submarine, attack submarine, and be a putz and not know game theory and know Clausewitz and all that.
Yep.
When the disaster happened with Carter, when he tried to rescue the hostages, he didn't blame the task force for not putting the sand baffles on the helicopters. He didn't do that at all. What did he do? He said, I sent them. It's my fault. He's the only president since that has done that.
Yeah. Taking responsibility, yeah. He was a great man.
I was
a genuinely great man.
Yeah, and I joined the Navy because of that. But I want to pass that on because I want to let so much of what's going on, there's so much different disinformation that's going on. I'm listening to PBS, and even they're just, nobody's really giving him the proper due for what was going on.
He stopped a nuclear meltdown by lowering himself into a nuclear reactor that was in the active process of melting down. I'm serious. Totally serious.
That's some balls. But now, to my point, I want to talk about mammon and mammon worship. This is a term that I've thrown around for a long time. I had an argument
MMON, the old biblical phrase for
the old biblical, right out of Luke. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had an argument one time with one of my fellow oil people, and we were talking about, there's only one God. And I said, no, there's several gods. So, I say, well, for one, mammon. It's like, well, mammon's not a God. Yes, he is. You cannot worship God or mammon.
Right.
So therefore, that implies that mammon is something that can be worshipped. Well, what is the worship of mammon? That's worship of wealth and power.
Exactly.
The power that wealth bestows and is bestowed. And what we have here is a group of people that are so consumed by greed. And mind you, every major religion in the world has long treatises about the dangers of unbridled greed to society as a whole.
Yep.
But these people, and the people that follow them, what is their primary driver? It's money. Who pays me? What's in it for me? It's all transactional. And, it's like he's incoming 47's talking about, okay, we're going to invade Panama. Okay, so you're talking about using the U.S. military, the one that you call everybody stupid for joining and everything. And, by the way, you want to cut off the VA benefits and Medicare and all that. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to use private armies. Okay, so what, you're going to pay them $100,000, $150,000 to be your guard? But what if they take a bullet? Well, they're going to have insurance. What's going to happen if they figure out that, your insurance will be declined, hence the robots.
Yeah.
Hence the drive to have robots, because that was one of the questions about if you have your bunker and you have your SEAL Team 6 or Black Ice or whatever, Black Ops people guarding you, well, they've got families too.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, and the idea that Trump might be planning to to encourage paramilitary operations, lawlessness. And that right-wing media might celebrate it like they do in Germany, like they do in Russia and Hungary. I'm
going to bring this home. I'm going to bring this home. Remember when all the police and the National Guard people and all of a sudden started getting out of service because they refused to do the COVID mandates and do the mask mandates and say, well, you can no longer work for us. Well, who started snapping up all those people? Oklahoma, Texas. They're putting them in. And these are people that will defy the federal government.
Right.
They don't see federal law as supremacy.
Well, I don't think it'll matter when Trump's in office.
Right.
And that's my concern. I mean, when J. Edgar Hoover was running the FBI routinely ignored violations of law by the Klan. I mean, they would perfunctorily, investigate lynchings and things like that. But by and large, they basically let white racists get away with just unrestrained violence against black people, right up until the mid '60s. And
one last word.
And I think we're going to go back to something like that. That's my concern, David.
One last word.
Yeah.
Jesus forgives, the state doesn't. People forget, computers don't.
Yeah, there you go. All right, David, thank you very much for the call. A lot to talk about today. It's 44 minutes past the hour, 45 in a couple of seconds. I'll continue picking up your phone calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And they're now carrying Jimmy Carter's coffin out to Joint Base Andrews, where they'll fly it down to Georgia, where he will be buried next to his wife. And welcome back. David in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to call and say that the dark futuristic sci-fi that we've been watching is almost here, very sadly. I was reminiscing of, pretty much, I was reminiscing about RoboCop and how the OCP company predicted a future in which companies can pretty much own the commons, and they own the police and secretly organize a strike in the sequel, and one of the corporate guys says, "We are taking Detroit private." And then you got Blade Runner and Ex Machina that presented an unchecked innovation in AI, and last time I checked, that story didn't end very well. And then we have, the company in the Alien movie that basically engages in every industry, jacks up prices on every good, have indentured servitude like we saw with the recent Alien movie, and then have the motto "crew expendable," add a dash of Handmaid's Tale, and we're going to get there pretty quickly. And it's looking pretty bleak.
Yeah, it really is like a bad movie, a Hollywood movie, isn't it? I mean, I would throw in Day After Tomorrow. The climate change disaster movie. Yeah.
And then you look at Mark Zuckerberg and everything, and Elon Musk, and they all have a god complex, which is not unlike the Peter Weyland character in the Alien movies. And it's just they have delusions of grandeur, and they don't care if civilization dies because of that. It's
it reminds me of this. I'm sorry. Finish your thought, and I'll share.
Disappointing and not surprising. And I've read enough cyberpunk sci-fi novels to know how this is all going to turn out.
Yeah, there you go. It reminds me of the numerous scientific studies in the field of psychology that have been done. Probably the most famous in terms of just having been published in newspapers all over the country came out about a decade ago, where they had simply put cameras on street corners where there were walkways, and without a light, and then also corners with lights, and they were noticing how many drivers violated the law. In other words, ignored pedestrians in the crosswalk, or ran red lights, or rolled did rolling right turns rather than stopping, or rolled through stop signs. And what they found was really striking, that the more expensive the car, the more likely the driver was to violate the law. The less expensive the car, the less likely the driver was to violate the law. And then that study, and in fact they called it the BMW effect, because the Beamer drivers were the very worst. But that's only because we don't have many Rolls-Royce drivers in the United States. But that study it parallels numerous studies that have been published going all the way back to the 50s that show that when people acquire wealth, as their wealth increases, so does their sociopathy, so does their wealth goes up and empathy goes down. And this is a measurable effect, and it can happen at any point in life. You know, you give a 20-year-old, enough money that they're independent for the rest of their lives, and they start sneering at homeless people. You give a 50-year-old enough money that they never need to worry about it again. They start sneering at homeless people, and those are the smallest examples. Imagine what having enough money to alter the course of the world, like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk have, what that must do to you psychologically. I don't think this is. I think great wealth is destructive to people. Yeah. Dave, I got to run. David, thank you for the call. It's 49 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
You came from humble Georgia soil, with a heart so pure and free from spoil. A man of faith who stood so tall. You lived your values through it all. When others took the easy way, you chose the truth, come what may. You fought for peace, you stood for right. In the darkest times, you were the light. Jimmy Carter, you were a voice for justice when the world was cold. You saw the future, tried to save the earth. A man of kindness, love, and endless worth. Through all the battles that you fought and won, you never wavered, always stood as one. Jimmy Carter, in everything you do, you've always been a hero, true. You want to change the rising heat, try to protect us from defeat. So the dreams of future bright.
Welcome back, 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, thanks for listening to KTRC. What's up?
Happy New Year, Tom.
Back at you, Brian.
Did you happen to watch any of the ceremony this morning?
Yeah, I watched, actually I listened to two of the eulogies, and I watched the part where George Bush refused to shake Donald Trump's hand. But,
yes, that's why I called. You mentioned that Fox didn't cover it, and I wanted to make the point. The reason they didn't cover it is because then they had to have covered Trump. And believe me, he was embarrassing.
Well, he was chatting with Barack Obama, and they were smiling and laughing and talking to each other while everybody else was, being quiet and respectful.
Yes, he looked like a 6-year-old in church. And I think Barack drew the short straw and was the one who ended up sitting next to him. And Michelle didn't show up, not surprisingly.
Well, why? I figured she was sick because that's, it's kind of...
It doesn't matter. But it was, the entrance of George W. Bush to his seat with his wife, walking past Trump, was really something.
Yeah.
Barack did a nice basketball move where he boxed Trump out of the way, and so he had his Barack's rear end was right in Trump's face. This thing was comedy gold this morning, and I'm imagining that PBS will air a replay of it this evening.
Yeah,
and it's hysterical. You got to watch it.
Oh, there's clips of it on all over social media right now. It's one of the headlines on Raw Story.
I'm cleaning my house, so I'm not on social media. I have to clean my house today. But anyway,
it's far more important, Brian.
Trump comes nose to nose with Mike Pence, and of course Pence stuck out his hand and looked adoringly at Donald, and they shook hands and nodded heads.
Yeah,
that was quite interesting. But Trump looked horribly bad. He was like a child, which is what we all know that's what he is.
Yeah.
But
emotionally, certainly.
Yeah, but it was good seeing them all. And one other thing I wanted to mention. Carter was, and there's an excellent podcast, if you don't mind I mention it. It's called History as It Happens, and it's produced by a guy named Martin DeCaro, I believe. And him and a few other historians review the Carter presidency and a little bit of his life. But it's really good and goes into detail about the energy crisis and the hostages. And, Ted Kennedy played a role in his failure to win a second term.
I know.
You need to remember that.
Yeah.
Carter had a lot of enemies within the established Democratic Party.
He's still, going into the election, he was still way ahead of Reagan. People were afraid of Reagan. And the thing that really killed him was the hostage situation. It just, it became the news every single day all over the country. People were tying those yellow ribbons around trees and stuff. And Carter, kind of got into the spirit. Let's all, unite around bringing this. But then when he, month after month after, it went on for 13 months. And
right. And
go ahead.
This podcast, they make the point that, as far as regarding the hostages and the rescue, Carter listened to the conservative elements within the government and the conservatives in the Pentagon and went along with them.
Yeah.
And when there was a failure with the mission, the Republicans turned around and beat him over the head with it and blamed him for it.
I know.
Which is just how deceitful they all are.
Yep, there you go.
But if anybody has a chance tonight, watch the start of the funeral. It's amusing.
It's very,
all the body language. It's like the high school cafeteria.
I got it. Brian, thanks a lot for the call. Jill in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Jill, what's up?
I wanted to comment on why Donald Trump might be doing the pardons of the insurrectionists.
Okay.
I'm currently reading a book by Kathleen Belew called Bring the War Home, The White Power Movement in Paramilitary America. She talks about how people who came home from Vietnam were angry and began developing some of the paramilitary groups and really brought a lot of the Klan together. And one of the things that happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if it will happen again, is the Ku Klux Klan had a Klan border watch program where they sent people to the border to intimidate people coming across into the United States.
Right.
So with Thom Hartmann being such a mean-spirited man, it would not surprise me if some of these people who are freed from jail by Donald Trump wouldn't get on this bandwagon of trying to intimidate and be vigilantes at the border.
I have a recollection which may not be accurate, so let me throw that caveat out there, of Homan being asked if he would welcome help from paramilitary groups or militias, and his either saying yes or his refusing to say no. But fact check me on that, because it's you get these recollections that don't have a specific. I can't remember the exact moment or what the circumstances were, so I may be wrong on that. But yeah, I think it's entirely possible, Joe.
He just seems so gleeful about the opportunity to strong-arm people.
And we're not going to separate children. We're going to deport the whole families, including the children who are U.S. citizens. I mean, that's his new shtick.
I'm just terrified with what's going to be happening to a lot of the people in this country.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. It's a really interesting book, Bring the War Home by Kathleen Belew.
Thank you. The war always does come home. I mean, that's the old saying. I don't know where it came from, but it is this famous old saying, the war always comes home, and it really does. Jill, thank you. Vietnam did, certainly the Gulf War did. That brought us Timothy McVeigh. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives. We did food drives. We did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside there was answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine, host of the brilliant podcast On the Edge, available wherever fine podcasts are available. You can find him over on Blue Sky at Ittner Philip, ITTNERPHILIP. All the Blue Sky, BSKY.social. And also he's got a video blog over on YouTube under Philip Ittner. Phil, welcome back to the program. How are things in Ukraine today?
Yeah, well, happy 2025, I suppose. I mean, it's pretty much kind of a status quo. Over the holidays, we got hit pretty hard. But on the battlefield, some movement in Kursk, by the Ukrainian forces. They've launched another assault from a different direction.
Kursk is the part of Russia that they seized, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay.
This is Kursk inside the Russian Federation. This is Ukrainian forces have been there for months, and they're fighting not only Russian troops but troops from North Korea that have been lent by Pyongyang. And so what the Ukraine, and this is an irritant, obviously more than an irritant. This is an embarrassment to Vladimir Putin, that the Ukrainians would be able to bring the war to them on their territory, but they can't seem to be dislodged. And not only are they not being dislodged, but they've launched a second, as I say, thrust from a different direction directly at those, in particular, North Korean troops. And they seem to be making progress there inside the Russian Federation. At the same time, however, down in Donbass, the Russian forces continue to grind forward kilometer after kilometer. But Tom, they're losing 1,000 to around 1,500 troops a day. That's 30 to 45,000 Russian soldiers taken off the battlefield in casualty, so either KIA or so significantly injured they will not be returning to the battlefield and will live with their injuries the rest of their lives. That's, again, 30 to 45,000. That's unsustainable, and they've already crossed the 800,000 casualty mark. That means if you do your arithmetic, sometime around May, May, June-ish, if things progress the way they're going, they will cross the 1 million-man casualty mark for the Russian forces. That's devastating, especially when you consider what are they doing it for. And they're just eking forward. They're just, mind you, on the other side, the Ukrainian forces are exhausted. They're undermanned. They are having problems with their command structure and soldiers going even AWOL. Both sides are in this. They're locked in this struggle. And while you hear words from Kiev saying, all you guys have to do is leave and we'll stop. We'll stop. But we can't stop as it is. And then on the other side, the Russians can't walk away from this thing because they haven't achieved their main strategic goals and are unlikely to do so anytime soon. Putin also caught in a catch-22 because he has transitioned his country to a war economy footing. He has hundreds of thousands of men mobilized, and he is suffering badly with his economy, not due in no small part for the sanctions, but also because he is on this war economy footing. So what do? Do you demobilize all these hundreds of thousands of traumatized men and send them back to their villages and towns where the economy is stagnant? Because if you stop it being a war economy, where some 25% of the economy is in building tanks and shells, and there's going to have to be a transition back, those hundreds of thousands of men who are trained in combat, they go back to their hometowns and there's no work to be done.
Yeah, we had a couple of pretty severe
Putin's in a
recessions
tough
here after
spot.
World War II for that very reason. That wartime economies are basically stimulative.
That's right, but it's a sugar high.
Exactly.
And so he's also caught with that. The whole thing is an absolute mess, Tom. And I don't know how there's going to be a resolution. I do believe in what President Zelensky has been saying recently, in that this year might be a year where we could maybe find a way to a ceasefire, but a permanent lasting peace is, I don't know how it's going to get done, and it certainly isn't going to be as easy as the incoming administration seems to think it will be. This is a complex situation with no easy answers, and all kinds of reasons why both sides of the conflict are kind of caught in the conflict. It's going to be a rough year.
Yeah, I get it. Big picture question for you, Phil.
Sure.
Putin, the world, shall we say, since World War II, and arguably before that, but I mean the rebooted League of Nations, the United Nations, kind of codified this as international law, has operated under a set of principles that the foundation of which is that one nation does not absorb another nation by force. And Russia obviously violated that when they invaded Ukraine. China is threatening to violate that with Taiwan, and arguably violated that with Tibet some time ago. The United States has always stood for that rule of law, essentially, that international rule of law, that taking another country by force is a crime that should never even be considered or discussed by a real power in the world. I mean, maybe some little third world country wants to have a border dispute, or Eritrea and Ethiopia or something like that. But major players in the world just never would talk about this unless they were just abandoning democracy altogether. And now we've got Donald Trump saying that he would not rule out using force to seize Greenland or Panama. He, by the way, apparently owes millions of dollars in fines and back taxes to the government of Panama for his failed Trump hotel in Panama. And he is mentioned some 3,000 times, apparently, in the Panama Papers, or reportedly. There's a piece about this in Newsweek. So there may be a secondary agenda here, or maybe he's just trying to distract people from the fact that right now Republicans in Congress are working very hard to come up with a bill for another $1 trillion tax break for billionaires. But I'm curious your thoughts on this sudden. I'm just shocked that more American politicians and the news media in America are not shocked by the fact that an incoming president would say, we're no longer going to respect the rule of law internationally?
Well, Tom, I know that people get on me when I say this, but this is yet another reason why I firmly believe that Donald Trump is compromised and is in some way or another working in the interests of Vladimir Putin. Yeah. And I know that's controversial because obviously it's easily dismissed with the whole Russia, and the Mueller report being so deeply flawed as it was. He doesn't have to necessarily support the Kremlin. He can be a disruptor in his own right and destroy from inside and break rules and create chaos and friction and everything that he's doing internally within the United States and breaking all these traditions and norms and threatening our neighbors to the north, which we have absolutely no beef with. The idea of absconding with Greenland is almost farcical, but this is exactly what invading Mexico. This is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. And I am afraid that sometime during this year, or sometime during the first 2 years of his administration, and let's hope the midterms go differently, that there will be a crucial point in this conflict. And while yes, there's all sorts of things that are going to happen with Trump and Putin and Zelensky, and there's going to be a lot of things going on with the Europeans as well. But when push comes to shove, when that crisis point comes in this war, I am definitely afraid that he will side with Vladimir Putin when it comes to this conflict. But you're asking me to talk about big picture. That's my big picture concern about the Trump administration.
I think
is a disruptor.
Yeah, I believe that the reason Trump is saying I will consider using force to go after Panama and Greenland, and has previously suggested invading Mexico without Mexico's permission, is that he is trying to legitimize what Putin has done in Ukraine. Oh, if the United States would consider doing it.
Yeah. No, it will give, and already you see it actually coming out of the foreign ministry and certain areas of Russian state media, which of course is not independent. It does the bidding of the Kremlin. Right. And you already see that narrative being put forward that if these things, then how can he bulk at us taking back what they see as their colony, and rightfully so. It's the whole thing is, buckle in. This is going to be a difficult year. The war itself is a mess. I have said it before, I'll say it again. The Russians can't win here unless they take Odessa and Kiev. And right now, they just simply don't have the capacity to do that. Right. They need Odessa to control the Black Sea, and they need Kiev to install a puppet government that's friendly to Moscow. Yeah. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. This thing is a real morass.
So and I have 1 minute to a hard break here.
Sure.
You have a lot of good connections inside the Ukrainian government. What are they expecting from Trump?
They're hoping that his ego will work in their favor. That he will try to push around Vladimir Putin, and that'll create some kind of these clash of these egos. They're not willing to. They're desperately optimistic about it because they have to be. Yeah. But it's obviously the erratic nature of Trump has everybody here very nervous about what's going to happen. They're hoping for the Europeans to step up, and frankly, we are starting to see moves within the European Union and the NATO members in Europe starting to say we can't rely on America anymore. We have to go our own way. It's divide and conquer, another thing that Putin would love to see.
Yeah, I get it. Phil Ittner, check out his podcast, On the Edge, available wherever fine podcasts are found. Also on Blue Sky, Ittner Philip, Ittner Philip. Phil, always great talking with you. Thank you so much for the update.
Take care, Tom.
Yep, stay safe. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Astonishing Trump meddling with the Supreme Court. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's your media support group for We the People. I'll be right back with you. welcome back. Dwight in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Hey, Dwight, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Yes, I just wanted to comment on one of your callers last week, a few days ago, called and was talking about Trump's involvement in Panama.
Right,
and I just wanted to add to that Trump has his name on a 70-story building there in Panama City. That was a physical confrontation between Trump's people and Panamanian officials because they came to take his name off of the building.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that. You're welcome. And I also wanted to comment too on there was a situation too that I recall from one of Trump's handlers from when he was in office before, whereas he wanted to launch a missile strike on Mexican drug labs.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody remember that or not, but
I remember talk about it. I don't remember it ever being confirmed, but I remember the buzz.
Right. And so when I think about that, I don't rule nothing out when it comes to this guy, because I thought that was the most preposterous kind of thing you could even think about doing. I couldn't believe it, but that's all I really wanted to say.
Okay, well, that was a good one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bill in Santa Monica. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I was just wondering, no one talks about this, but with Trump's age and the way he eats, his diet, the fact that he won't exercise because you only have so many heartbeats according to him, I think the real danger with Trump is that if he should find out after ranting and raving, but finally he realizes that he does have a terminal disease because of his life habits, do you think he would go gently into that good night, or would he take as many people as he could with him? In other words, start perhaps a nuclear war with China or something. I can't believe that he would just lay down and die without trying to get lost in the shuffle.
I don't know. I mean, his psychology is so twisted. That would be a question to put to Mary Trump, the psychologist who's his niece. It's, given his age, his weight, and his diet, I would think that the most likely way he would go is not, with some terminal disease, but that he'd either have a heart attack or stroke out.
Well, that would be. That would be better for the world. But if he were to die, if he were to have a terminal disease, for instance, his diet gave him lung cancer, I just don't believe that he would just die and let the successor take over. I really believe he would take as many of us with him as he possibly could.
Yeah, it's a grim thought, Bill. I can't discount it. And I would think he'd probably be a greatest risk for something like colon cancer, given his diet. But who knows? Who knows? Or maybe liver cancer.
He would have time.
Yeah.
Which he would have time to make a move.
Yeah, there you go. Bill, thank you, I think. It's been good talking to you. And the best for the new year. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In 94, the paper signed, a promise made to ease the mind, a deal of trust, a hopeful dawn, but now we see how it went wrong. Ukraine gave up its mighty shield, the power no nation dared to wield. For peace they traded fire for trust, now that promise lies in dust. Oh, the Budapest betrayal, a trust exchange, but hearts impaled. The world looked on, it turned away, while children cry where bombs now lay. The Budapest betrayal, a shattered vow, a tragic tale.
Yep, we signed, England, Russia, and was there another? Oh, and Ukraine. The four countries that signed the Budapest Accords that said that Ukraine would give up all their nuclear weapons. They had this world's third largest stash of nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War. They would give them all up if Russia would recognize their territorial boundaries forever. And Russia said, we will, and in fact, we will defend you. And so much for that. Anyhow, back to your calls. Tom in Mossy Head, Florida. Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Hey, Tom, back in the early 90s, I volunteered to work on one of those Habitat for Humanity houses.
Mm-hmm.
And, Jimmy Carter showed up and to work, and he actually worked, and I had the privilege of working beside him. And here's what really geeked me out a bit. I was hanging drywall that particular day, and there's arches. The doorway, you have a, half moon top arch.
Mm-hmm.
And he was standing there watching me, and he goes, do you mind if I watch you? I've never seen anybody deal with an arch like that with drywall. I said, sure. So I showed him how you do it, and he was really cordial and nice about it and everything. And anyway, long story short, after he stayed there a couple of days, worked, did various jobs, hard-working guy, too, for his age. But anyway, he, my power miter saw took a crap on me. The motor went out. And the next day, there was a brand new one sitting on my workspace. And I said, where'd this miter saw come from? Oh, Jimmy Carter bought it for you, and he gave it to you. And on the on the saw, Jimmy was gone, but on the saw he wrote, "Thank you, teacher, Jimmy Carter."
Wow!
And man, that was like the coolest thing I'd ever had happen to me in my life. I really respected the guy. He was just so true to him. He's just a stand-up dude.
What a wonderful story, Tom.
I still got the saw too. I never did use it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's almost like a religious relic. I mean,
yeah, kind of like it, a chalice or something.
What anyway, mostly was he doing there? What kind of work was he doing?
Well, we were doing the inside of the house. It had already been framed up and everything, and he would help hang drywall and whatever needed to be done.
Pound nails,
right in there and help.
All boards.
Yeah, pound nails. Yeah. Cut wood. He just laid right in there. It seemed like he knew what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it really, he said, he goes, I've never seen anybody deal with an arch because you can't bend drywall. What you do is you take on the backside, cut like 3/4 of the way down, about an inch apart, slice it, and then it'll bend without breaking.
The social worker had texted.
Yeah. Tom, I got to run. I'm sorry, we're in a break.
I sat at my desk.
Thanks for the call.
Cell phone, reading and rereading the text. My thoughts traveled to Honduras, bachata, ballades, clothes hanging on the line. So many things in our lives seem to have prepared us for this moment. My son was attending a bilingual school. I'm a former ES. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that national and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed, reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Doomdiverses would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
It starts with a promise, a populist glow of how to shake the system, make the status quo go. But behind the curtain, the stage is set for a power play we won't soon forget. They charm the crowd, they seize the mic, then target the truth and dim the light. The pillars quake, the ground runs red, a democracy hangs by a thread.
Welcome back. A couple of quick stories here I wanted to share with you before I pick up your phone calls again. Joe Biden has presidential immunity, right? The Supreme Court said that when a president is engaged in official acts, if he breaks the law, it doesn't matter. Now, Jack Smith has written these 2 reports, one about Trump's crimes trying to steal the election in 2020 and then, overturn the count and everything else, the fake electors, the whole thing, on the one hand. And then the other, stealing classified documents from the White House and taking them down to his roach-infested motel, Gulf motel, and well, maybe it's not roach-infested nowadays, right-wing infested. Anyhow, taking pest-infested, yes, taking them down there where they can be easily available to spies who we believe showed up at Mar-a-Lago on more than one occasion. And Judge Elon Cannon in Florida said, no, you can't publish either one of these reports. Now, she only had any arguable jurisdiction over one of them, which was the Florida, the document case, and that's been dismissed. So she doesn't even have any live jurisdiction with that any longer. So by what authority does she stick her nose into this? By basically none, other than I'm a federal judge, I can do what I want. And the petition that she went along with was a petition from Trump's lawyers to Merrick Garland. And so now you got Merrick Garland saying, okay, I won't release the documents because Elon Cannon told me not to. Now, here's the thing. The law is actually, he's actually following the law, Merrick Garland. The law says if a federal judge says you can't do it until an appeals court or the Supreme Court overturns that federal judge. And that process is in process right now. But the law also says something it didn't say a year ago by virtue of law being created by 6 right-wingers on the Supreme Court. And that is that President Biden is immune from prosecution for any crimes he commits while he's in office. A crime is breaking the law, right? The law says that Elon Cannon says that Merrick Garland can't release this report. But according to the Supreme Court, if Joe Biden, walked down the hall and got the report and then walked back to the press, to the White House press office and, press room and said to the reporters, here you go, that he can't be prosecuted. Or if Merrick Garland did it himself, that Trump could just pardon him. Now ask yourself, if the tables were turned, if this was a Democratic president who was desperately trying to prevent the release of something incriminating against him, or a Democratic former president, and there was a Republican in office, there was a Republican president, don't you think the Republican president would say, screw that, I'm going to release it anyway? I have immunity after all? Don't you think that's how Trump will behave when he comes into office, ignoring the law and claiming immunity? So why don't Biden and Garland do this? I mean, the reason, of course, I can tell you the answer. The reason is that they're still respecting the law, in quotes. But they're playing by the old rules. There's new rules. And those new rules were created by the U.S. Supreme Court when they said that if a president breaks the law while he's conducting official business, and certainly this is official business, Jack Smith was, officially put into office with I believe, a presidential directive. It just seems like do it. The other amazing story I wanted to share with you, and then I'll pick up your calls. Dr. Elizabeth Potter posted her story to Instagram this week, and this is just an amazing story. Alarming surgery on a cancer patient. It was called a deep inferior epigastric perforator, DIEP, which is a form of breast reconstruction during or after cancer surgery. She's in the middle of the operation. And a nurse comes into the operating theater and says, United Healthcare is on the line. You have to stop. If you don't talk to them, they're not going to pay for this procedure. And your patient is going to end up, massively in debt. So the surgeon says to the anesthesiologist, keep her knocked out, and scrubs out of leaves the room, is no longer sterile, is going to have to scrub, go through the whole 20-minute scrub process to come back in to finish the surgery. This woman's laying on the table, unconscious, with her chest all opened up, to take the call from this idiot at United Healthcare. And this is what she said. I'm quoting now. She said, she said I had to call right now, so I scrubbed out of my case and I called United Healthcare, and the gentleman said he needed some information about her, the cancer patient. He wanted to know her diagnosis and whether her inpatient stay should be justified. In other words, should she be in the hospital right now? And I was like, do you understand this? She's asleep right now and she has breast cancer? And the gentleman actually said, actually, I don't. That's a different department that would know that information. And I was like, well, she does need to stay here overnight. And then she goes on. She says, yeah, it's out of control. Insurance is out of control. I have no other words. And then Newsweek called her up and she said, this trend is disturbing. There's no room in healthcare where the pressure of insurance isn't felt by both patients and doctors, not even the operating room. When will we say enough is enough and push back? I'd say now. This is already out of hand. Holy crap. All right, what's on your mind? Craig in Waldport, Oregon. Hey, Craig, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. And on your earlier comment, this is kind of a reach, but Trump is almost certain to pardon Walt Nauta, his body man, and property manager Mar-a-Lago Carlos de Oliveira. So if President Biden pardons them right now, wouldn't this nullify Cannon's block on releasing the special counsel's report related to the classified documents case? The pardon would remove the threat of irreparable harm, while Nauta and de Oliveira matter is considered by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah, that would be another way to do it that would be entirely within the law. What I'm suggesting is extra legal, arguably, but again, we haven't tested the bounds of the presidential immunity doctrine that the conservatives on the court laid down. But yeah, that would be a strategy too. I doubt that Trump would do that, or that Biden would do that.
I do too.
Just out of principle. But that makes a lot of sense, Craig. Because for people who don't know what we're talking about, the basis of Aileen Cannon's saying, no, you can't publish these reports, is that part of the report on the Mar-a-Lago stuff had to do with these two, co-conspirators of Trump's who worked for Trump, these two employees who are still apparently being prosecuted, right?
Yes.
Or was the prosecution dismissed? No, the prosecution was dismissed. Actually, I don't know if or not, but whether they are or not, her point was they would be irreparably harmed and made public.
I think it's at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, the last thing I read. So it's still live, and that way, President Biden doesn't have to do anything. It's uncomfortable, but it's not illegal.
Yeah,
doesn't even have to use the immunity from SCOTUS. So just a thought.
There you go. That's a good thought, Craig. Thank you. You keep thinking. I like the way your brain works. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. Take care.
You too. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Yes. Hi, Tom. Earlier today, you mentioned the BMW effect.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of, what you were saying was that the wealthy people who drive BMWs tend to break laws more often. And I think that is the tip of the iceberg there. It's also, more pedophilia, more child abuse, perhaps, not just breaking of laws. And I think it's a deep neurological effect. We talk about, we all know PTSD, if you see something horrible, it changes not just how you think, but it changes the actual neurological structure.
Right.
And in fact, there was a Scientific American, and this is recent, in 2004, I think it was, published an article called Scars That Won't Heal. And they were trying to describe the fact that when this child abuse happens and these things happen, it causes actual physical changes in the brain that don't change. They change your behavior. And I think that's happening to our billionaires.
I think so, too.
It's like, we've heard of the tragedy of the commons. Well, we've got a tragedy of the billionaires' commons, where instead of, if you're familiar with that, the farmers are supposed to, as a group, take care of a common land. They mismanagement, all the cows and the grass die, and all the farmers die. Well, in the case of the tragedy of the billionaires, there's no cows, it's us.
Yeah.
There's no pasture, it's the planet. And it also leads into, when you talk about sociopathy, it's not really that the brain is damaged as much as it's adapted to the way the world really is. A traumatic thing really did happen, and your brain says, if something scary happens, I'm going to jump like crazy. And that's the proper response. It's not an improper response to dive under the table if you hear a car backfire, if you've been through war. That's the appropriate response. And same thing with success. And when someone has success, it's behaviorally transmitted. And that's something that I think is the key thing here. When we saw Trump, dominate things, basically if you break a social norm, in order to get away with that, you must be the top dog. If you can grab an infant and do things to it, you're the top dog. And that sociopathy, when it spreads to the population, causes us, as you abuse the population, it becomes even more and more willing to be abused. And that...
You develop everything from the Stockholm Syndrome to the battered wife syndrome. I would argue that there is something, and I've written about this before, and I've used this phrase. I don't know if it's if anybody else has ever picked it up or a real phrase, but I would call it wealth-induced sociopathy. And or psychopathy or psychopathy. I don't know how to pronounce those words, but
Could you reach out to Dr. Sapolsky and bring him in, because this needs to be focused on.
Yeah.
I mean, the gentleman.
Maybe Bandy Lee would like to come on and talk about it. There's a couple of psychiatrists and psychologists, or Justin Frank, that we have a relationship with, who would probably weigh in on. Michael, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Thanks for bringing that up. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with you and your calls. Welcome back. David in North Palm Beach, Florida. Hey, David, what's up?
Welcome to North Miami Beach, which has no beach. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. By the way, David, hang on just a second. Sean just looked this up. Walt Nauta and Carlos, whatever his name is, Dela, whatever, they are still being charged in the context of those crimes. Just FYI. So back to you, David.
Yes, to build on your previous caller, there's the experiment that proves that if people are winning at a game, even if they know it's tilted in their favor, they'll still take credit for the win. So you have to worry about that sociopathy, especially at the multi-billionaire class. But I'm calling because I had the honor of seeing Jimmy Carter in 1990 here in the southwest of Miami, and his rival John B. Anderson right after the 2004 election debacle. To remind you that in the alternate timeline, if the Desert One rescue in Iran had succeeded, on the one hand, it would have put John B. Anderson on the cover of Time magazine instead of that debacle. But it also would have, legitimized all the deregulation that that Jimmy Carter was doing. That is being so blessed by all these talkers, as if it was all wonderful. Oh, we have cheap airfare and craft beer. Isn't that nice? Instead of
everybody was all excited about neoliberalism, basically, and Jimmy Carter bought into it too. I mean, certainly in the last year and a half of his presidency.
An easy mistake for his generation. I get it. Yeah. But it's just sad that it set up the situation.
Well, I was all gung ho for it too. I have to confess, David. I mean, I never voted for Reagan, but Louise and I moved in 1981. We moved from New Hampshire down to Atlanta to open a business, a travel agency, because the travel industry had just been deregulated. And we started our own frequent flyer program. We were the first travel agency in the country to run a frequent flyer program. Only American Airlines had one at that point. And it got us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I mean, we built that company up to $6 million in just a couple of years, and then sold it off and moved to Vermont and retired. Or moved to Germany, actually, in 86. Yeah.
Well, but the trade-off being didn't that help give us the air traffic control strike? They felt no,
the deregulation of the airline industry had nothing to do with breaking the PATCO.
Okay.
Reagan broke PATCO. Carter deregulated the airlines, basically, and trucking and the railroads, which led to and then when in '83 when Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act. That was when the railroads all started consolidating. We went from having hundreds of small to ending up with basically 2 or 3 big ones. I'm not sure the exact number. And the airlines, we went from, I think we had 34 or 35 airlines, in 1980. And when the mass consolidation started in the 80s, we're down to, 4 major airlines now in the United States?
If we're lucky. Yeah. Yes. Also, in my alternate timeline, Steve Bannon doesn't get radicalized by the failure. Back when he was a lowly lieutenant, junior lieutenant in the Navy.
Yeah. It's funny. It's hard to think of Steve Bannon as a naval officer, but he was.
Sometimes it's hard to think of Bush the Elder that way too. But there he was.
Well, he was a war hero.
Yes,
I mean, he was flying combat missions in World War II. David, thank you for the call. Thank you very much. It's 51 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
The echoes of history call our name. A world divided, a deadly game. From Kyiv streets to the western shore, freedom's cry we can't ignore.
Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Nancy in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Hey, Nancy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Let's go with this.
There is, isn't there?
Yes. Well, first of all, believe me, I do not want to defend faux news in any way, shape, or form. But the funeral was on my local faux news channel today. Mm-hmm. I checked all the channels, so maybe
the Fox, the division of Fox that owns television stations, is a completely independent entity from the division of Fox or Universal or whatever the company is now that Rupert Murdoch calls it, that does Fox News.
Okay, well, I don't know. Does that mean it wasn't on cable, so it wasn't? I don't know. It
Fox
was on
News is exclusively on cable. If you've got a Fox-owned station, that the only relationship between a Fox-owned station and Fox News is that both are owned by the Murdoch family, at all.
I see. Well, anyway, the other thing was I was wondering myself, why wasn't Michelle there? So, and I thought the same thing. Oh, she must be sick or something. But I looked it up, and I don't know. This is what came up on my phone. She didn't go because I hate to say her name too, but Melania was there. And I guess there's bad blood between them. They quoted some things that Michelle said about her and all that stuff. And
oh, interesting.
So,
now, what I got, and again, this is just basically gossip on social media as far as I know. I haven't seen anything verified. I thought she was sick. Apparently she's not. She's in Hawaii and she has other commitments, in quotes. But what I heard was that she was supposed to sit next to Donald Trump, and that was something she could not tolerate.
Oh, I don't blame her. Yeah.
And clearly, when you look at the seating arrangement, she would have been sitting next to Donald Trump.
Exactly.
So,
and I can't believe they did that. Don't they have any?
Well, I think they were organizing the presidents, and according to the sequence in which they served.
Right, but still, they should. Common sense. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. My thoughts are that this system is entirely broken, and it's not being handled the right way in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. That's where you and I disagree, because here, answer me this, please. They talked about nothing but how they'll never have to vote again. Just vote for me this time. You'll never have to vote again. Now, I'm not hearing anything. I'm hearing all the Democrats tell me, who, like I kept telling my friends, oh, well, Harris would get elected, except for the fact that I'm trying to figure out how the Democrats are going to screw this up, and just what they did. So anyway, I'm not hearing from any Democrats that we still have the threat of not having midterms. They're talking about, we have to work twice as hard for the next 2 years because, we're going to get them in the midterm. What if we don't have midterms?
I think we will. I don't think that Trump is going to be able to take things as far as Putin did, but that may be rosy optimism. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see.
I think so, because I'm not that optimistic. I'm sorry to say, but I've had too many years of this. For the last 50 years, I'm a couple years older than you, I believe.
Yeah.
And I've been told from the first time I voted was, we got to get rid of Electoral College.
We came within one vote of it in the Senate in 1974.
I know, but the problem is we keep getting close and no cigar.
Yeah.
And then when we do get something passed or something, the cons are already swooping in, breaking the law. Nobody's holding anybody accountable. And that's the reason they're in charge. And the minority has been in charge forever.
Yeah.
My belief is that the Constitution was never written to support democracy. It was written to, keep the white man in charge. But that's my theory. I don't think we've ever had democracy in this country.
There was a large component of that in the Constitution, because they had to satisfy the demands of the slave owners in the South in order to get those states to sign on. And large parts of that were taken out of the Constitution, through the amendment process after the Civil War. But I really think that the idea, I mean, these guys were doing this in a vacuum. There hadn't been a democracy in a couple thousand years when they invented American democracy.
I agree. Our founding fathers did what they could at the time.
I think it was pretty damn dramatic what they pulled off.
Right, exactly. But the problem is we're still living by those same laws, and we have never changed any of the major rules or laws or whatever you want to call them.
I would argue that the problem is that great wealth has crept in and corrupted our institutions, particularly the Supreme Court, and thus our laws have changed, actually. But I get it. We may have a slightly different view on this. Nancy, thank you for the call. Good talking to you. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed, because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. A book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless, because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is, or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear. The case against free speech.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. On the line with us, the great Dean Obeidallah, my colleague and buddy, host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, weekdays 6 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, right here on Sirius XM Progress 127. He's got an extraordinary daily or regular newsletter. It's called The Dean's Report. DeanObeidallah.substack.com, or just go over to substack.com and plug in Dean's Report, and it'll come right up for you. He's also over on Blue Sky as Dean Obeidallah on .bsky, all that other stuff. Dean, first of all, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You have a novel legal theory about why Donald Trump can't become president. I have a novel legal theory about this, the release of this Jack Smith report.
Okay.
And you're
who goes first?
Attorney, and I'm not. Yeah, thank you. Let me run mine by you, and then you can run
yours
by me.
It's your show. Whatever you want to do, I'm happy.
And by the way, who do you think is more pissed off about Obama and Trump yucking it up this morning? The racists who are freaking out over on X, or Democrats?
It's hard to say, but Obama looked like the guy on the airplane when someone gets sat next to them and they won't stop talking, and Obama's like rolling his eyes and just trying to be nice the whole time.
Yeah.
So that was good. I saw Trump had more makeup on than I've seen men in a drag show have on.
Yeah,
he had a lot of makeup. There's something wrong with him, by the way. He looked awful at his press conference. I'm not making light of this either. I don't wish ill for anybody. I really don't. I despise the guy. He didn't look well at his press conference. They put extra makeup on. That's a lot. That is covering up some kind of condition. Not sure what, but there's something.
He's getting old, and he is
right. That's part of it. I understand.
Quite, out of shape, and his diet sucks. So, anyhow, here's my theory.
Go ahead.
The law says that if a federal judge says you can't do something, you can't do that until an appeals court says yes, you can, and the Supreme Court weighs in and all that kind of stuff. I'm correct about that, right?
Sure. The law says if there's an injunction or any kind of court order, you cannot take it on yourself to overturn it. You need an appellate court to overturn
has said to Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, specifically to Merrick Garland, but inferentially to Joe Biden, you may not release this report, and that's the law, buddy. But doesn't the law now also say, as a result of the Supreme Court creating law last year, doesn't the law now also say that presidents can do whatever they want, even if it breaks the law?
Well, they're doing it. There are three different buckets, right, in the Supreme Court decision. One is if it's a power enumerated in the Supreme Court, which in the Constitution, which means just laid out in writing, like the pardon power, absolute immunity. You can literally sell pardons on eBay. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. That's the law now. So that's what they've said. Anything enumerated. So your commander-in-chief, you can sell it. Then there's the middle bucket, which are official actions. They have a presumption of immunity. It could be arguably overturned, but there's a presumption that there's immunity. And then the third one is personal actions. You're just doing things for your fun, for having little giggles and stuff like that. That one's going to get no protection at all. Right. But the way it's just an amorphous, it's a mess, right? So Joe Biden's taking official acts. Says, I'm releasing this report because I think it's national security that America sees it. That's like the highest level. You're getting into something that's just about enumerated in the Constitution.
Yeah,
meaning arguably has absolute immunity.
Two scenarios. One, Biden walks the thing down to the White House press office and says, "Here, guys." And then says, to Aileen Cannon, go ahead and sue me. I have the right to break the law. Just ask, Clarence Thomas. Or B, Merrick Garland walks it down there and hands it to the press and then says, I guess I just broke the law, and Biden pardons him.
Well, first of all, Merrick Garland's never going to do that. Merrick Garland has been the greatest failure of an AG. Right. Like he is. We need accountability for Merrick Garland at this point. That's where we're at.
I'm with
you. The other point, if Joe Biden, like if you play this out really, no joking, if Joe Biden were to violate a court order and say, I am doing this for an official action and just articulate it in some way with legal counsel that gives it the cloak of an important action consistent with the Constitution, then but he is still in violation of a court order. He has violated a court order. And then I imagine somebody like Trump's DOJ would try to hold him accountable. Yeah. Then the defense would be, but hey, I've got this defense. But it's not like, okay, here's a motion, we're all done. It's going to go back and forth and drag out over time. And I don't think Joe Biden at this point in his career is sort of in the twilight, to be honest, wants to deal with that. But that's the real world.
That's a good point.
That's all it is. No, but I'm not saying don't do it. I'm going to do it. Give us the report.
Right.
Biden, your last act, give us the report. Who cares what they're going to do?
Yeah.
I'm just giving you, if I was his lawyer, I'd tell him this is the real world impact of you. What do I want to do? Exactly what you're saying, Tom. Give us the report.
Yeah. Amen. And also the Supreme Court essentially said, we'll tell you what an official act is. You have to bring these things back to us. And so they could rule against Joe Biden and for Donald Trump for the exact same thing if they chose to. But okay, let's get to your theory here, Dean. Your theory rests on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which I've had no shortage of phone calls about since ever since Trump was elected, and with which I agree. I believe he's in violation of the Constitution, a naked violation of the Constitution, and I also believe that part of the Constitution is self-executing. I don't believe it requires Section 5. I think that really was written for Sections 1 and 2 because phrases like due process are fairly ambiguous or could be ambiguous, but or equal protection under the law. But you are arguing that even by the standards that the Supreme Court has set that would prevent the 14th Amendment from being used, it could still be used. Tell us how.
Look, first of all, Donald Trump's going to be sworn in on January 20th. We all must accept that. Nothing after the certification of his win. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
But here's the reality. There's nobody listening here who doubts Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection. And you're not making that up. The Supreme Court of Colorado ruled that. They affirmed a trial court decision in Colorado, which went through a great analysis, a trial with experts testifying what was an insurrection as contemplated by the 14th Amendment, Section 3. Got it. Check mark. We also had New Mexico for another person. Same thing. It's definitely an insurrection. Did Donald Trump engage in it? Of course he did. He was the insurrection. The January 6th report said the central cause of the January 6th attack was one person, Donald J. Trump. There's no disputing it. Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection. He should be barred the same way as if Donald Trump was 25 years old and born in another country and people really liked him and they voted for him and he won. He still will be an illegitimate president when he's sworn in on January 20th. And I had John Boniface on from Free Speech for the People. He's a constitutional law expert. And we talked about this. That's his view as well. It's not me making this stuff up. As a legal matter, the only way to challenge it is going to be someone going to court to challenge Donald Trump's decisions. Because arguably, if he's illegitimate, his decisions are invalid. Now, will any court really rule that? I doubt in this world that they will do it. Going up to the Supreme Court, we know that is corrupt. But that's the real world. That's what we're arguing. But I really urge my fellow Democrats, Donald Trump is an illegitimate president. Say that nonstop. Say it to your Trump friends, because legally you have a good argument. Second, Trump deserves it politically because he tried to delegitimize Barack Obama with a racist birther campaign and Joe Biden with the election lies, the big lie. So he deserves the payback now. He's an illegitimate president. We should keep saying it. Democrats should be saying it. It would be driving Donald Trump crazy. Instead, Democrats are saying nothing or let's find common ground. I don't know what happened to the Democratic Party that we saw before November 5th. They kind of gone now. Yeah. I'm not really sure. There's some out there that are fighters. And the tone has changed so much, Tom, that my listeners we're all befuddled. Like, were you misleading us when you said the guy was a fascist and was a threat to our republic? Because we thought he was too. Now you're silent and you're not using that same language.
I know. I've been saying the same thing about, where's Kamala Harris and, where's everybody
Where's everybody?
else?
What is going It's not a joke. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I don't think the leaders realize they're hurting their own credibility in the long term with our base. Because next thing they say, we go, well, they're not really going to fight on it. So why should we emotionally invest in it? Yeah. Why should we work and make phone calls and knock on doors and stuff?
I would add, by the way, and I got this from your newsletter, from the Dean's Report.
It's a very good newsletter. It's free.
Basically, the Supreme Court said that the reason that Trump can't be kept off the ballot and can't be kept out of the White House is because Congress never passed legislation acknowledging or certifying, or whatever the appropriate legal term is, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And, the you can't serve if you engage in insurrection. But you point out that the article of impeachment, which was approved 232 to 197 by the House of Representatives and voted by 57 voters, senators in the Senate, arguably passed both houses, although it didn't pass the Senate because it was filibustered. But that vote explicitly said he engaged in insurrection and even references the 14th Amendment. So is there not a legal basis for preventing him from becoming president?
I think there's a good faith argument you can make to that effect. And that because what the Supreme Court said in the decision with the Colorado cases, they said Congress needs to act. States, they did not, the U.S. Supreme Court, controlled by Republicans, did not say Colorado was wrong, that it was not an insurrection January 6th and that Donald Trump did not engage in it. They didn't get into that discussion because they knew it was not going to go well. So what they said is states can't enforce Section 3 when it comes to federal office holders. Only Congress can. If they didn't say Congress got to pass this express statute, they said Congress has to act. Well, my argument is Congress did act. They passed the impeachment resolution, which is called incitement of an insurrection. It cites Section 3 of the 14th Amendment disqualifying. It passed the House. That same resolution was the basis of the impeachment vote in the Senate. 57 senators voted for that. You needed 2/3 to convict him, but a majority already did. My argument is, hey, Congress acted. The House and the Senate both voted Donald Trump, and he incited, that was the word they used, an insurrection. And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is cited right there. And one of the remedies they asked for is banning Trump from office. Now, I think this is a good faith argument. No one's going to take it up. We got a week that he's sworn in. But it's frustrating because Democrats should be making these arguments. That's our point. It's my point, your point, listeners' point. Make the arguments. Don't lay down like the lamb to the slaughter. It's beyond me. So look, the Democratic base, we're going to have to be the leaders going forward. At the end of the day, the leadership's going to have to listen to us, and they're going to have to fight harder. if they want our support. That's what I think it comes down to.
Yeah, I'm with you. Grow a spine.
Yeah, come on.
Dean Obeidallah. You can hear him on SiriusXM Progress Channel 127 every night from 6 to 9 p.m. You can find his brilliant news. It's free, by the way. You sign up for it.
Free.
Dean's Report over at Substack.com. Dean, thanks a lot. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye. Always
Take care, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
You too.
It is 18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Bernie Sanders just lit out on Elon Musk over on Fox. I'll tell you about that right after the break. And welcome back. John in Wrightswood, California. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thank you for sitting on hold so long, by the way.
Yes, I'm calling about just kind of updating. I've been listening to you all morning, and you have the greatest support of the people out there for all these things that are going on. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Very proud of you.
Thank you.
But I just called because my sister called, and she told me that in Bakersfield, California, they started sending the Border Patrol out there and rounding up all the immigrants over there.
Today?
And so, actually yesterday, it was it's on the YouTube. She told me it was on YouTube. It's from the news station over there, K something.
Right.
But it's on YouTube, and they're doing this. It says they're doing this ahead of Trump's coming into office.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if this is the ICE going rogue.
Kind of, but it is.
Or if it's Biden trying to take the wind out of his sails.
It's the Border Patrol, the Border Protection Operation.
Right.
So it's immigration raids in Kern County.
Amazing.
So that's Bakersfield, Arvin, all that.
Right.
But
I'll have to check it out. John, thanks for the tip on that. I got to move along, but thank you for the tip on that. That's fascinating. We'll see if there's a story under that story. Thank you. Tom in Bremerton, Washington. Hey, Tom, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Hey, yeah, thank you. So I'll have to subscribe to his newsletter, but there's kind of two little pieces of data that I just synthesized, and it's kind of freaking me out. And the first of this is this idea that's been floating around for some time that, like, okay, every empire lasts a certain number of centuries. The American empire is reaching that time, so we're going to see the collapse. The other one is Trump, threatening to take Greenland, take Canada, take Panama. And what occurred to me is I don't think we're seeing America collapsing as empire. What I think we're seeing is actually a conversion of America from a nation state with hegemonic power, an attempt to convert that to a real empire, similar to when the Roman Republic, which practiced regional hegemony for a while, became a real empire under Julius Caesar.
Right.
And
it was essentially the end of small d democracy in the Roman Empire.
Right. And that's kind of, with Trump kind of soft threatening to, saying things like, this is the last election ever going to have to make, and the tech pros who want to implement their sort of anarcho-capitalist communes where they have absolute power. Yeah, technocracies. This dawned on me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think might be something to this. Like we're actually seeing an attempt to actually.
Trump's saying that the United States consider using force to seize the territory of two other countries, Panama and Greenland, and to invade Mexico. Trump's saying that out loud is no president since George Washington has said that out loud. I mean, we did it. We did it with James Polk in the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. But Mexico wasn't even really recognized as a country, arguably, at that point. I mean, Polk was claiming that this was territory. I think this is a major departure. I'm just amazed that the big news media aren't just freaked out by it. Tom, I got to run. Thank you. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
40 years of Reagan's game, the middle class forgot its name. Unions broken, wages bled, dreams of millions left for dead. The billionaires keep stacking gold while working hands are bought and sold. But now we stand, the choice is clear. Do we fight or disappear? Neoliberalism's death grip tight, or a new deal rising in the night.
Welcome back. Boy, Bernie Sanders just, well, this is kind of faded out of the news over the last couple of days, this little mini war or kerfuffle or whatever it was between the billionaires, the tech billionaires, the tech bros, principally represented by Elon Musk, and the millionaire Republican reactionary, well, principally represented and around the H-1B visas. You'll recall when Trump was president last time, he said we need to get rid of H-1B visas, that they're just used to replace American labor with foreign labor that works for less money, which is true, by the way. And but Trump hires people on B-2 visas because in his hotels, he's always thought it was very sophisticated to have people with accents serving you your drink or serving you your lunch. So if you go to Mar-a-Lago or you go to one of the big Trump hotels, the people that you interact with, by and large, are going to be Europeans. They're going to be white Europeans who speak with an accent, which is why he's a heavy user of H-2B visas. He likes those. But now he's claiming he's using H-1B visas. But anyhow, Bernie Sanders comes out. And meanwhile, Elon Musk is saying, no, we've got to have H-1B visas to bring in these tech workers, mostly from India, because we just don't. And Bernie is calling BS. This is amazing. He says, billionaires like Elon Musk claim it is crucial to our economy, arguing that the United States faces a shortage of highly skilled engineers and technology professionals. They are dead wrong. The primary purpose, Bernie says, of H-1B visas and other guest worker programs is not to employ the best and brightest, but instead to replace American workers with lower-paid workers from abroad who often live as indentured servants. The cheaper it is to hire guest workers, the more money the billionaire owners of these large corporations make. If there was truly a shortage of skilled tech workers in this country, Bernie writes, for Fox News of all places, if there was truly a major shortage of skilled tech workers in this country, why did Tesla lay off over 7,500 American workers last year, including many software developers and engineers at its factory in Austin, Texas, while applying to hire thousands of H-1B? Together, Bezos, Musk, and Zuckerberg own more wealth than the bottom half of America. Billionaires are buying elections, and there's a greater concentration of ownership than at any time since the Gilded Age. Is that the society we want for our country? And then he goes on to say, this is oligarchy. Trump is a perfect example of that. You lie, you cheat, you steal. He was involved in over 4,000 lawsuits as a private businessman. He lied all the time. And then, Bernie goes on to say, but we all love him because he's rich, or TV loves him, or the media loves him because he's rich. And does that make him a good person? It's kind of a, mixed message, but yeah, H-1B visas. Really? We really need these things? Interesting stuff. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of this break. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Up next, Ron in Huntington Beach, and then Michelle in Chicago, Bob in Tahlequah. We got a bunch of callers here. We'll be right back with you.
Hi, for our book club today, we're reading from Bernie Sanders' new book, Where We Go From Here, 2 Years in the Resistance. This is from the introduction. During my campaign for president in 2016, I stated over and over again that the future of our country was dependent upon our willingness to make a political revolution. I stress the real change never occurs from the top down. It always happens from the bottom up. No real change in American history, not the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, the environmental movement, or any other movement for social justice has ever succeeded without grassroots activism, without millions of people engaged in the struggle for justice. That's what I said when I ran for president. That's what I believe now. That's what I've been working to accomplish over the last several years. At a time of massive and growing income and wealth inequality, as our nation moves closer and closer to an oligarchic form of society, we need an unprecedented grassroots political movement to stand up to the greed of the billionaire class and the politicians they own. And the good news is we're making progress. People in every region of our country are standing up and fighting back against the most dishonest and reactionary president in the history of the republic. In state after state, they're also taking on establishment politicians who are more concerned about protecting their wealthy campaign contributors than they are with the needs of the middle class and the working people they're supposed to represent. We're making progress when millions of people in every state in the country take to the streets for the Women's March in opposition to Trump's reactionary agenda. We're making progress when an unprecedented grassroots movement elects a young African American as mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. We're making progress when tens of thousands of Americans turn out at rallies and town hall meetings to successfully oppose the Republican effort to throw 32 million people off health insurance. We're making progress when governors and local officials announce in response to student demands tuition-free public colleges and universities. We're making progress when over the past 2 years, hundreds of first-time candidates of every conceivable background run for school board, city council, state legislature, and Congress, and many of them win. The good news is that the American people are far more united than the media would like us to believe. They get it. They know that over the past 40 years, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, the middle class has continued to shrink while the very rich have become very much richer. They know that for the first time in the modern history of the United States, our kids will likely have a lower living standard than us. The bad news is that instead of going forward together, demagogues like Trump win elections by dividing us. The bad news is that too many of us are getting angry at the wrong people. I was not an immigrant picking strawberries It was not an immigrant picking strawberries at $8 an hour who destroyed the economy in 2008. It was the greed and illegal behavior of Wall Street. It was not transgender people who threw millions of workers out on the street as factories were shut down all across the country. It was profitable multinational corporations in search of cheap labor abroad. Our job, for the sake of our kids and grandchildren, is to bring our people together around a progressive agenda. Are the majority of people in our country deeply concerned about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that we are experiencing? You bet they are. Do they believe that our campaign finance system is corrupt and enables the rich to buy elections? Overwhelmingly they do. Do they want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage and provide pay equity for women? Yes, they do. Do they think that the very rich and large corporations should pay more in taxes so that all of our kids can have free tuition at public universities and colleges? Yep. Do they believe that the United States should join every other major country and guarantee health care as a right? Yes, again. Do they believe climate change is real? You got to be kidding. Are they tired of the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, falling apart at the seams with roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, rails, levees, and dams either failing or at risk of failing? Who isn't? Further, a majority of the American people want comprehensive immigration reform and a criminal justice system that is based on justice, not racism or mass incarceration. Today, what the American people want is not what they're getting. In fact, under Republican leadership in the House, Senate, and White House, they are getting exactly the opposite of what they want. The American people want a government that represents all of us. Instead, they're getting a government that represents the interests and extremist ideology of wealthy campaign contributors. They want environmental policies that combat climate change and pollution and that will allow our kids to live on a healthy and habitable planet. Instead, they're getting executive orders and legislation that push more fossil fuel production, more greenhouse gas emissions, and more pollution. They want a foreign policy that prioritizes peacemaking. Instead, they're getting increased military spending and growing hostility to our long-term democratic allies. They want a nation in which all people are treated with dignity and respect and where we continue our decades-long struggle to end discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and nation of origin. Instead, they have a president who seeks to win political support by appealing to those very deep-seated prejudices. During the last several years, I've worked hard in Washington, but I've also traveled to 32 states in every region of our country. I've seen the beauty, strength, and courage of our people. I've also seen fear and despair. I've talked to people with life-threatening illnesses in West Virginia who worry about what will happen to them or their loved ones if they lose the health insurance that keeps them alive. I've talked to young immigrants, dreamers in Arizona who are frightened to death about losing their legal status and being deported from the only country they have ever known. I talked to a young single mom in Nevada worried about how she can raise her daughter on $10.45 an hour. I talked to retirees and older workers in Kansas who are outraged that as a result of congressional legislation, they could lose up to 60% of the pensions they paid into and were promised as deferred compensation for a lifetime of hard work. Bernie Sanders, where we go from here.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had a piano, and I loved to play it. I was incompetent, but I was figuring out all kinds of stuff. And then I kind of got away from it, and, went to school, and things got busy, and just lost track of it. Well, now there's this fascinating new study out of the University of Geneva, Switzerland, that is making me think maybe I should go back and learn the piano. What they found was that they took a group of 132 healthy older adults, retired, 62 to 78 years old. Half of them learned the piano, half of them took music classes without learning the piano. And what they found was that those who learned the piano actually had the strongest increase in their memory, in their mental competence, their mental faculties. Those who took the music classes also did well, but learning the piano was a huge step. So check it out. There's a whole long rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
The shadow of fascism drapes the land, where CEOs shake the dictator's hand. Oligarchs learn to play the game. Profit and silence, they're one and the same. It happened before, it happens again. History's warning ignored by men. The lines get blurred, the truth fades away as companies line up to pay to play. When corporations kneel, democracy dies beneath the weight of greed and lies. Fear and favor, the strong man's creed. Compromise kneel when corporations kneel.
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Ron in Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Great speaking with you. I was talking to your screener, and just the contrast between Carter and Reagan. And first of all, God bless President Carter for all the great things he's done. Yeah, and it just kind of got me this morning how Reagan kind of pulled the wool over a lot of our eyes. I mean, I was 8 years old when he was elected, so thankfully I dodged that bullet. But my viewpoint as a young person was like, gosh, he's so great, and he's talking to Russia and he's working things out with Gorbachev, and he's fighting for America. And meanwhile, he was, wasn't he defunding like the mental institutions, and he was like,
right, he cut school funding 20%, and by the way, it was George Herbert Walker Bush who was working with Gorbachev and who oversaw. I mean, yes, Reagan did meet with Gorbachev and they did talk, but the end of the Soviet Union happened during the Bush senior administration, not the Reagan administration. Reagan gets all the credit for it. He just gave a good speech.
Wow. Yeah. Oh,
it happened in 1991. Reagan left office in 1988. At the end of 88.
Oh my gosh.
It's 3 years later.
And that's the thing. When was that must have coincided with right-wing radio coming about, because it seems like at the time there was a vacuum for progressive.
Yeah. Reagan fast-tracked Rupert Murdoch's citizenship so that he could own television stations in the United States. And I believe Rush Limbaugh started his show in 86, might have been in 87. I'd have to go back and look, but it was around that time. And that was the Reagan administration. And it was 86 that Reagan did away with the Fairness Doctrine. So I'm pretty sure it was 87 that Limbaugh started out. But yeah.
And what's really funny, all of these years, I thought that I had at one time voted for a Republican and was responsible for voting a Republican into office, but I wasn't of voting age when George H.W. came to
so we can't blame you for that one, right?
So I can't. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, and the first person I voted for was Clinton. Yeah. And then unfortunately, Kerry didn't come to fruition. I was like really bummed about that. That was when I was first kind of, really paying attention. But I really appreciate your show, and I just God bless President Carter. I can't even believe it. So anyway.
Well, I'm with you, Ron. Thank you. Good comments. Great comments. Thank you so much. Worth waiting for. Thank you so much. From Ron to Ron. Ron in Hamilton Field, California. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Well, one thing, if I could just reverse this for a second. In July the 16th in 1988, I was the producer for the final event of the Soviet-American Peace Walk across the United States, which I believe the current president had a great deal to do with, and under the banner of George Shultz. So that's not why I called, but I'm just commenting on that issue as a fairness for that current president during that timeline.
Yeah, Senator Biden at the time.
Not Biden. What was his name? Ronald Reagan or Reagan? What was that? That was who the president was.
I see. You're talking about Reagan. Okay. All right.
Yeah, 1988. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. His part in the Soviet relationships and friendship relationships. Those people came across country who visited everything we had, saw what we had, went back to the Soviet Union, and eventually there was a revolution.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Reagan should get some credit for that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll concede that.
No, but that's all I'm saying.
But the Berlin Wall didn't fall until George Bush was president.
That's right. That's right, and I remember that clearly.
I was there. I wasn't in Berlin. I was in Budapest, Hungary, the week that the wall fell. But we had East German refugees flooding into Hungary at the time. But
yeah, that's what we had. We had a first phone, what we thought was a video phone, but it wasn't really a video phone at that time. It was a cell phone that basically went over there, and we could see still pictures coming back and forth from that. But I called specifically for my background at Hamilton Field and the closing base there, Air Force and Army Airfield Base. When I hear about these fires in Southern California, which my wife is from, and they went through it years ago, but those fires going on this long, that air pollution, it's well known that dioxins are created within those fires as well as other chemicals. Those people are bioaccumulating in their tissues, those poisons.
Yeah, it's why the authorities are telling people to wear masks. We went through this a couple of years ago here in Portland when we had massive wildfires around here, and you couldn't. I mean, it was like a heavy fog. And we saw, a year later, we saw a spike in heart attacks and strokes. I mean, it's that particulate pollution.
But that pollution also, as it can go into the fatty tissue, be stored as bioaccumulation and go and trigger disease down the line, could be decades before. My issue on this particular subject goes to like East Palestine and their settlements trying to buy off the people before they will have a disease down the line from the bioaccumulation, and also in Georgia, the biolab fire and explosion there. These companies are trying to buy these people off at early stages, obviously, so they don't have to pay for the health care that's going to be down the line, which the government is going to have to care for. Now, what happens in Southern California when a year, 2 years, 10 years down the line or more, these people come down with something, and it's going to be the taxpayer's burden? I ask this one question. Why do corporations need a discount who are basically, in many of these accident cases, not rather than acts of God, responsible for those conditions that they expect the taxpayer to pay, and yet they want reductions in their taxes?
Well, and the fossil fuel industry wants another $600 billion subsidy this year. And my question is, why is nobody talking about the fossil fuel industry's complicity, arguably causing these fires in Los Angeles right now? Where the Santa Ana winds being as extreme as they are a consequence of global warming, the weakening of the jet stream, and the tropical storm, the first in history that Los Angeles had 16 months ago, was a consequence of global warming, and that caused an explosion in vegetation in areas that had just been, like desert. And now that vegetation is on fire, and it's spreading the fires. And now we've got, either the driest or the second driest winter, summer, the last 12 months in the history of Los Angeles. I mean, like 0.2 of an inch, I think, was the rainfall. And again, this is the consequence of global warming, and global warming is the consequence of the fossil fuel industry dumping their pollution into our atmosphere and asking us to pay for it. Why is the fossil fuel industry?
The chemical industry.
Well,
the chemical industry, sir.
I'll give you it.
They're all related, though. What I'm trying to say is you're right. Absolutely, because the chemical industry is what's supported by the
chemical industry, by and large, is the fossil fuel industry, because most of our chemicals are made from fossil fuels. So
that's the point.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm with you, Ron.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We need to be talking about this. We really need to be talking about this. They knew. The fossil fuel industry knew in the 50s. They knew in the 60s. They knew in the 70s. They knew in the 80s. President Carter told us about it in the 70s. This was coming. And yet, we're all acting like, oh my God, look at something just happened in Los Angeles. I wonder why. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
50 years ago, we're predicting exactly what is happening right now. The fossil fuel industry's own scientists. And welcome back. Let's pick up some calls here. Patrick in Branchland, West Virginia. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you today?
I am great, Patrick, but I'll get better. How about you?
Well, I'm hoping I'll get better. Hey, first thing I got to tell you is my phone's about to die, so I got to be real quick.
Okay.
Dems need to get tougher. It was embarrassing this morning. It really was. I know it was a funeral, but daggone.
You mean Obama shouldn't have been cordial with Trump?
Donald Trump is the most disgusting rag of an individual I've ever seen, and Obama's sitting there and chatting it up with him.
Yeah.
The two people that showed the most class was Pence's wife and Obama's wife for not coming.
Well, and George W. Bush for walking right by Trump and refusing to shake his hand and then going and shaking everybody else's hand.
Take Obama's hand either.
Well, that's because Obama was in the middle of a conversation with Trump at the time.
Obama's hand either.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, I'm going to get to my topic here. The laws and policies that we pass, if you don't put enough funding behind them, they mean nothing.
That's true.
They mean nothing.
That's
All
true.
right, we're in the middle of class warfare. It started with Ronald Reagan. Well, probably farther than him, but he is the one that's most relevant to me.
Yeah.
Let's think about it. The Republicans just lie. They don't tell the truth, and they don't care, and we don't hold them accountable for it.
Yep.
Talk about media. Who owns the media? Rich people. Who owns medicine? Rich people. Who owns to the hospitals in this country? Rich people. This is class warfare, and if people don't wake up, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said,
We are
Patrick.
in serious trouble. I don't know if I heard this, and I'll throw this out there to you, but here is something, I don't know where I heard this at, but a million seconds is 11 and a half days. A billion seconds is 31.7 years. Now, you think about that.
Yeah, or think about it in the context of spending.
A millionaire and a billionaire is
spending $1 a second.
Astronomical.
You know.
I mean, and it's pitiful.
Yeah.
And here we are, the Democratic Party is, we just don't feel like they're fighting for us.
I agree. I know that some of them are. Some of them are fighting very hard for us. But A, our media will not tell us about that, and B, so many of them are just, they're just hoping that we can go back to a time of normalcy and civility. And I'm telling you, the next 4 years are not going to be that. We need to be punching back.
That ship has sailed.
Yep. Well, maybe we can bring that ship back, 4 years from now. But right now, no. This is, it's. I mean, we're in the middle of a.
I really wish we could, but I don't. I have to disagree with you because I'm telling you, I don't think they're going to let up on it.
No, they're not.
They're going to keep hammering it, and they're going to try
to have a constitutional convention and amend the Constitution. They're going to try. They're going to try and completely turn this country inside out and upside down. They're going to try and take us back to pre-1932. Their campaign, their project, is to entirely reverse the civil rights era and the New Deal. Just completely reverse all that stuff out and go back to the Gilded Age. And we're partway there, Patrick. We're partway there. Thanks a lot for the call. Great to hear from you there in West Virginia. It's 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
Crossroads lie before us, the shadows grow so near. A path of light and liberty, or one ruled by fear. With banners raised in anger, the tyrants call their band, but the people hold the power. It's democracy's last stand.
Minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Michelle in Chicago. Hey, Michelle, what's on your mind today?
You're my May 1951 birthday brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my husband and I want you to know we listen to you almost every day, and we really enjoy your show.
Sweet.
I had two things I wanted to ask. Talk about. One, you had the Dean Obeidallah on about Trump, and I guess the question I have is if they allow Trump being president, what happens to Vance? Does he also get disallowed? That's a question, I guess, for later.
Yeah.
But the second thing
it's not going to happen, I guess. So it's an entirely academic exercise anyway, Michelle.
I know. Well, I'm praying that 2025 and beyond is way better than we expect at this moment, that we have some surprises coming. So that's my hope. But the other thing is that I got a message to say.
Michelle, your phone is breaking up, and I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm gonna put you on hold here, Michelle, and Jeremy can pick up the call and figure out what's going on. Let's make sure it's not on our end. Bob in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hello, Tom.
Okay, your phone is working, Bob, so it must be Michelle. We'll get back to her in a second. So what's up?
I'll try to be quick. Hats and feathers to you, Tom and Dean. And I always like hearing what Bernie says. He's an honest man. And, we miss Jimmy Carter. We sure do. Yeah, he was the first president I voted for. And while I was standing in line, they announced that Reagan had won.
Yeah, he was the first president that I voted for who became president. Because my first vote was against Nixon in '72. And then, against Ford. And finally, Carter won.
Yeah. Well, historical context here. We've lived through some hysterical times. I used to try to entertain my family by imitating President Johnson. And I don't know if they're entertained, but anyway, We've seen a lot of things, and I think Oklahoma, for instance. And by the way, Happy New Year to you from the Cherokee Nation here.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Back at you.
Oklahoma's. Thank you. Oklahoma's rated pretty poorly in the way of nutritional knowledge and so forth, and so we wonder how people can be making decisions for us. I just want to be quick here. The U.S. Declaration of Independence was the first law of the land.
Well, we weren't a nation at the time, so it wasn't the law. It was a proclamation.
It was the first law of the land by the Continental Congress, which established our nation as a nation.
But that was after the Revolutionary War. The Declaration preceded the Revolutionary War.
It is what it is.
Well,
we're all related.
It ratified the Revolutionary War. I think you could make an argument that the Revolutionary War had started about eight or 9 months before the Declaration, but still.
No, I'm not an expert at anything, but when in the course of history it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them.
Bob, I'm going to have to ask you to stop reading from the Declaration and make your point, because I need to get a couple more calls in here and get back to Michelle.
My point is this, and C.S. Lewis has made this point. But I mean, we are what we are. We're all related, and we're going to keep talking.
Okay, so your point is we are what we are. Bob, thank you very much. Michelle in Chicago, you want to try it again?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
It's working now. Fine. Yeah.
Okay, so the second thing, the reason I called is I got a post on Raw Story, a video of young, they look white people setting fires in areas of Illinois, where they were not Illinois, California.
In Los Angeles.
They were in Santa Monica.
Wow.
Yeah, setting fires.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got the video, and the guy calling into the
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. Michelle, thanks for the heads up. You're starting to break so much for the heads up on that. I appreciate it. Dan in Denver. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to give you your missing piece from the discussion you had with Dean. And basically, the Supreme Court, they only accepted they only ruled on the one issue, did the Colorado Supreme Court error in allowing and excluding him from the primary ballot. Mm-hmm. And they did that because they said that there was no federal statute in place that didn't allow him to be on the ballot.
Correct.
Now, the opposite is totally, the coming to holding office is totally the opposite. There is a statute. I looked this up, Title 18, Section 2383.
Oh, yeah, it's a law against sedition.
Yeah.
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 No, sedition is a federal crime. You're right. A 20-year penalty.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, well, it's more than that. It's like, it says, whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States.
You're absolutely right, Dan. Dan, I'm out of time. I'm sorry, but thank you for that. That was a great contribution to the program. And my apologies to everybody else on hold. Tomorrow's Anything Goes Friday, so we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.